A young man is hurled into another world with no special skills or cheat codes, left only with a fresh young body and a glowing status screen. Desperation seizes him when he spots eyes watching from the forest. He asks himself if surviving that unknown, deadly place is even possible. Mamiya Uto, a salesman for a certain company, returns to the grind, fighting through waves of heat as the scorching sun sears the pavement. Forced into an uncomfortable suit by his boss, he storms through the city, rage boiling as he rails at his stubborn superior and kicks himself for not taking the car and paying the fuel himself. Utah toils at an exploitative company that bleeds employees' emotions dry, and despite the toxic culture and meager pay, he keeps a smile glued to his face because he's terrified he won't find another job if he walks away. He scrapes by on meager pay, trapped in a grinding loop of repetitive work, clinging to tiny sparks of relief, like the rush when a new book finally drops. Uto now devours stories about ordinary protagonists hurled into other worlds who awaken overpowering abilities, memories of the fantasy games he used to play. Surging back as plunging into those tales gives him a thrilling escape from reality. He laughs, joking he'd love to be whisked to another world. Then the air snaps and a mysterious voice cuts in. "I found you." Utah freezes, fear clawing at his chest as a strange figure hovers beside the company building. He gapes, breath snagged. Could it be a ghost? The man beside him snaps to attention, brows knitting as he scrambles for an explanation. Both stand frozen, thunderstruck by the sudden apparition. Darkness swallows Yuto and he plummets into a bottomless void as a stranger's voice announces itself and oddly apologizes for snatching him so suddenly, while panic claws at him as he's ripped from the life he knew. Face to face with a mysterious godlike figure, Yuto reels as a single crushing revelation breaks over him. He'll be sent to another world. Stunned, the clues slam into place and he realizes he's plunged into a classic isekai. Dizzy, he stares at the stranger with the bun-shaped hair and wonders if they're actually a god. Udo claws at the idea it's only a heat-crazed dream, but a divine figure's voice snaps him awake, declaring the space undeniably real. She smirks and declares she'll catapult him into a fantasy world crackling with magic, bristling with deadly weapons, and packed with uncanny powers. Spellbound by the idea, Yuto's excitement explodes. He pleads for an overpowering skill, and as the surreal haze clears, a cold, electrifying truth settles in. This isn't a dream, it's real. Yuto's voice cracks as he asks if he'll receive a special skill. The new smiling figure grins and flatly says he won't. Startled, Yuto stumbles back and pleads to be sent home. Going to another world with no edge, he knows, would be suicide. So crushed, he calls it a dream and turns to leave. The celestial figure proclaims Uto will willingly step into another world. A restless emptiness gnaws at him, and that very hunger is why she could manifest before him. A gutting shock crashes over Uto, staggering him as he confronts the frustrations churning inside, and he can't deny the truth of those words. Yuto flashes back to his student days, nights lost in virtual worlds, devouring isekai fantasies, and admits he craves that life, but swears he won't be hurled into it without ironclad guarantees. Danger closing in, rage boiling in his veins, he swore to force a powerful skill from the god who summoned him and seize a cheat whatever the cost. He refused to survive on willpower alone. Rage boiling, Uto storms at the entity and spits that he's utterly unprepared. No gear, no magic, no fighting training, and accuses it of wanting to watch him suffer and die in another world, demanding if that's its goal. Desperation claws at him as he snarls that being sent like that will be a death sentence. He refuses to go quietly. After relentless pleading and soul-crushing despair, Yuto finally hears a single yes. The entity vows to help him. They promise it'll make him young again. Uto goes over the top, shouting to be reset to 0 years old. But after a fiery debate, they compromise on 13, and he demands some skill or blessing. They concede and press a handmade status screen into Yuto's hands, one he can summon at will, and, satisfied with the progress, Yuto rockets back into the negotiation with fierce, unshakable resolve. Yuto demanded an overpowered ability, roaring that his status screen was useless, so the fed-up entity snapped, hurled him screaming into the new world, and as he crashed down, he realized nothing had actually changed. The entity watches, drained to the bone, forcing out a ragged sigh as frustration churns within. As Yuto hurtles toward the new world, the entity watches with an enigmatic smile and pronounces, "He will be the most blessed existence. His fate hinges on his choices, to awaken and destroy or to be destroyed." And she leans in, eager to see which path he chooses. Yuto bolts upright in the nameless forest, howling curses at the bun-headed god who tossed him there. Confused and unprepared, he rants about being shoved into a survival environment, despite being only an RPG player with zero survival game experience. Huddled behind a rock, the harsh reality of what's coming starts to sink in. Yuto forces himself calm, stares at his own body, and the shock hits. God really made him younger. He proves it to himself. Confusion claws at him. But this isn't the time to complain. He has to act. Regret gnaws at Uto as he replays his negotiation with the god, convinced his greed cost him a better bargain. He walked away with only a younger body and a cold status screen. He clings to the one scrap of victory he wrested. Now that he's in that world, he refuses to quit and admits he crossed blades with someone leagues above him in power and authority. Urgency hits like a punch. Yuto snaps into survival mode, tearing through his packs and inspecting every single item he brought. A flashlight, batteries rattling, screwdrivers lined like soldiers, company papers fanned out, a calculator, an unused phone, pens, a notebook, and some work objects. Yuto scavenges everything in reach, fashioning crude tools and weapons as he races to carve out shelter, snatch water and food, and spark a fire before night falls. Determined to survive, he rips his own clothes to move freer despite the pinching shoes, then steels himself to accept his fate and launch a final challenge at the bun-headed scoundrel who sent him here. As he adapts, a white circle blinks at the edge of his vision, probably the status screen button, and confusion snaps into a sudden electric understanding of the new world's rules. Uto jabbed the white circle that flashed into his sight, and in an instant a colossal form erupted into being before him, leaving him stunned. He jolts backward, breath stolen, then stunned understanding crashes over him. This is something monumental that can change everything. Yuto slams his status screen open and snarls as the oversized panel swallows his entire view. He bends it to his will with a thought, yet he scathingly mocks the bun-headed god's laughably bad design choice. He fixes his gaze on the screen. His name, level 1, only basic attributes. The blessings and skills slots stare back empty, proof he got no special power. Yet he studies every detail with hungry curiosity. Uto dives into the skills screen and his jaw drops. Over 100 skills glare back, from brutal combat and arcane magic to life-saving support and even hands-on crafting. His eyes snap to the menu. He can unlock skills with points likely earned by leveling up or clearing quests, each skill flashing a bar that shows if it can be learned or upgraded, so like a gamer. He grabs a notebook and scribbles down his starting status to get organized. Yuto's eyes are glued to the skill list, so he doesn't spot a monster sneaking up. An early-stage creature pounces at him with savage force. Terror claws at Yuto as he realizes he's never been in a fight, doubt igniting. With no skills and no preparation, he's staring down real danger for the first time in this new world, unsure he can defeat it. Uto forces calm and zeroes in with razor logic, spotting the monster, only slightly larger than a rabbit, and realizes he must predict its moves to survive. The creature's horn is a lethal trap. A single hit could kill Yuto outright, or leave him broken and helpless. With no healing skills or items, he knows one slip means death, so he advances with razor-sharp caution. Yuto reads the monster's intent, anticipates its charge, and snaps a split-second plan into motion. Unarmed and untrained, he wraps his jacket into a ragged cloak and clutches it before him, jaw set, eyes blazing, poised to fling the fabric as a distraction or crude shield the instant the strike comes. Exactly as Uto predicted, the monster hurtled toward him at breakneck speed. He rips off his jacket and slams it into the creature's eyes to blind it and throw off its aim. When the charge hits, Yuto digs in, squares his shoulders, and gears up for the next move. Determined to flip the fight even with zero combat skills, Yuto hurls his expensive suit like bait at the monster's feet to steal its focus, and when the beast charges, he rolls sideways and pounces on the opening to strike back. The plan lands, just barely. Then the monster convulses and thrashes, cutting off any approach. Yuto snaps, "Stop moving!" and stays razor-focused, eyes hunting for the smallest opening. Yuto roared, wrapped the creature in his reinforced tie, then drove its own horn through its body. Furious at wasting such a costly tie, he staked everything on that final blow. He crashes to the ground, lungs burning and gasping, eyes glued to the monster. Did that strike finally kill it? Bone-deep exhausted, Yuto decides celebrations must wait. He needs somewhere safe to sleep, spots a towering tree and eyes climbing it to ride out the night. He channels every ounce of energy from his rejuvenated body, bellows exaggerated war cries, and launches into the climb, recalling office tricks to loop his belt into a makeshift harness and unleashing fierce creativity and raw survival instinct. Perched atop the tree, Yuto scans the endless forest and realizes there's no exit, no city in sight. Sweat-soaked and wounded from the fight, he knows the bun-headed really tossed him here to die, and as that being's comforting words echo in his head, he faces the brutal truth. He's utterly lost, but still standing. Crushed by despair and the weight of the problems ahead, Yuto razor scans the scene, locks onto the sun, a distant plain and a river threading beyond the forest, steels himself and heads that way. Even with everything weighing him down, a sliver of the future cracked open. He flashed an iron smile and vowed to storm through that forest, even if it costs him everything. Mamiya Yuto still remembers the instant it began. The bun-headed god snatched him up and hurled him into another world. No special powers, only a rejuvenated body and a flickering status screen. He clawed through that desperate first day. Courage and split-second thinking kept him alive. He spent the night perched in a tree, bone-tired but breathing, and he ends his introduction with a determined smile and a happy ending, at least for now. Uto jolts awake atop the tree, every bone protesting, fury exploding as he realizes he's still trapped in that world. He snarled about missing his soft bed, forced a stretch through the aches racking his body, and zeroed in on his next move. He charges toward a river, foraging for anything edible as he goes, and remembers the horned rabbit he defeated as an emergency reserve. Exhaustion tugs at him, but his resolve to survive steals him. Geared up to push onward, Uto's gaze snapped to the multifunction watch still strapped to his wrist. His eyes snapped to the device. It's a clock, and the built-in compass points true north. He slaps his forehead in disbelief, then explodes with excitement at how modern tech can guide him even in another world. A sudden clamor of birds jolts Uto upright. Relief hits him when he realizes they're devouring the fruit. He studies the fruit like it's a puzzle, judges it harmless and ravenous, dares to sink his teeth in, hoping it's not poison. Yet even cautious, relief and joy light his face at finally finding something edible. Uto snatched fruits and devoured them, each bite flooding him with the thrilling certainty that he was finally making progress. He slammed his status screen open and watched the gathering skills experience bar surge upward. He suspects the fruit he kept collecting triggered it. After trading blows with the horned rabbit, his taijutsu surges, and a thrilling truth hits him. Repeat an action, and your skills level up. A game mechanic now alive in his new world. Noticing the world's system runs like a game, Yuto's eyes ignite and excitement surges through him. He realizes this mechanic might actually save his life. Exhilaration surging through him as he charges forward with razor-sharp confidence. A strange light flickers from a nearby gap in the forest. Curiosity drags him forward, and he edges closer, pulse hammering, clueless about what waits. Uto stiffens as a goblin steps into view, more human than the horned rabbit. Hesitation claws at him, but he brands it a threat, steels himself, and charges into the fight. Dead set he won't lose this time. The goblin locks onto Yuto and barrels forward, shrieking like a mad thing, and the boy's face snaps white as he stares at the creature racing toward him with murder in its eyes. Aggression hit him blind. He recoiled on instinct and cold dread slammed in. This was way worse than he'd imagined. The goblin's brutal blow sends Uto hurtling through the air. He crashes across the ground and fights to a painful stop, the blow hammering through him. Wounded, he forces himself up as the goblin roars, its furious cry proving the fight is far from over. Realization hits Yuto like a punch. He'd underestimated the goblin. Even after landing a solid blow, the handicap of being level 1 glares at him. And furious, he limps away, admitting he was naive to charge into direct combat without preparing. Utah snaps awake. Goblins aren't just injured, filthy NPCs, they're real enemies. He rips away every naive thought, plants a steely glare, hefts a makeshift weapon, and charges the enemy to kill. No mercy, no hesitation. Bleeding and battered, Yuto pins the goblin to the ground and unleashes every ounce of strength. It thrashes, but he never hesitates. One precise, deadly strike ends the fight. Panting, determination blazed in him. He would survive that brutal world. Uto crawls to a tree and slumps against the trunk, breathing ragged, exhausted, and badly hurt. He slammed his hands on the wound to stop the bleeding, and realization hit. He'd underestimated the enemy. Pain seared through him, but his quick reaction kept things from getting far worse. Clutching his wound and praying it won't worsen, he learns the brutal truth that every decision here can cost you. Uto limps back to the spot where he fought the goblin, senses something wrong in the air, and the realization crashes down. This world isn't a game, it's merciless and lethal. He finds a mutilated body and the truth slams into him. Here, death comes without warning, so he vows to move with ruthless caution from now on. Cutting through a strange dark mist, he felt a crushing pressure slam into his back. Every muscle snaps rigid, freezing him mid-breath. He's hurled to the ground! Coughing, he scrambled to grasp what had slammed into him. Shaking off the last impact, the protagonist bolts upright as a strange creature erupts from the ground and confronts him. Stung by the attack, he freezes at the creature's cute face. Confusion steals him for a heartbeat, then focus snaps back. He remembers he was the target and, suspicious, tries to figure out how that creature managed to hit him. Caught flat-footed, the protagonist reels as the creature begins to weave a spell. He can't even parse the magic before panic claws at him. The attack is already within reach, so with no choice he slams his briefcase up as the only shield he has. The spell slams into his briefcase dead on. He yanks it up like a shield and barely keeps himself from harm. Even reduced, the strike slams like a warhammer. He knows one more hit will shatter his resistance and leave him defenseless. Realizing the briefcase won't protect him, and he can't trust his dodges, he has no choice. He throws himself full speed at the enemy, ready to risk everything. The creature's eyes flare as it gathers raw energy, readying another spell. Fueled by raw strength and iron determination, the protagonist explodes into a thunderous kick that crushes the creature and snuffs its spell before it can form. A brutal blow detonates into his face, blood geysering out as that single strike ends the fight. The protagonist felled the creature before it could unleash another spell, then let out a long, ragged sigh of relief. Gasping, he collapses against the tree, replaying the danger, when a notification flashes in his vision. Level 2 reached. A rush of satisfaction, only to have it ripped away by the brutal truth that this new world is cruel and relentless. He shot awake on the rickety branch, every muscle screaming. Sleeping in the treetop hadn't erased his exhaustion. He staggers, every muscle screaming after back-to-back fights with a goblin and a mole. Bloodied and battered, he must clean the wound now. He staggers forward, filthy and parched, the stench and crushing exhaustion gnawing at him until he realizes he's teetering on the edge. He hears the water and bolts, lungs burning to the spot. A bubbling spring meets him, and relief floods through as he wonders if he's finally arrived where he wanted. Spotting the water, energy explodes through him. He rockets forward, howling with relief, then flings himself into the stream, finally able to cool off and tend his wounds. After scrubbing himself clean and gulping down water, the protagonist snaps into action, assembling the bare essentials he'll need to survive. He scrubs his clothes clean, taps the land for supplies, finds drinkable water, lands fish, snags a rabbit for meat, then checks his haul and knows he's got enough to keep himself alive. He whooped and pumped his fist as the trap he'd built brimmed with fish. His brilliant idea had paid off. Food and water secured, he zeroed in on learning fire magic and roared his new goal into the air, hungry to push his power higher. He staggers back to the makeshift refuge he cobbled together beside the thundering waterfall. He dives into the skills menu and funnels his level-up points straight into fire magic. A confident grin flashes as he plants the first point, then he pours in more, buzzing with the thrill of progress. He leapt up, fists punching the air when he learned fire magic level 1, convinced he'd unleash devastating spells. Then his grin collapsed as the skill's description revealed it was a meager flame with less than 10 magic power. Confusion churned in his gut and fury flared. Why hadn't he learned something spectacular, like a direct fireball? Not fully grasping its mechanics, the protagonist hurled himself into a bold test of his new skill. Confidence blazing, he thrusts his hand forward and roars, "Fireball, activate!" Expectation crackling as he tries to wield magic for the first time. He keeps trying to activate his fire magic. First, he rips activate from the incantation. Sure, it's just dead weight. He experiments with a barrage of hand motions, convinced one will sway the outcome. No quick win shakes him. He presses on with fierce resolve. He launched attempt after attempt, flinging frantic gestures at it, and the world stayed brutally still. Patience snapped and rage boiled in him. He'd poured 2 precious skill points into the ability and it sat useless. So he burst out, "Why won't it work?" He sucked in a breath, forced his mind still, and realization slammed into him. The mole's magic had spewed a black mist, a raw pulse of spellcraft, and he can't ignite his own power because he's missing the vital short enchantment skill. Without it, his fire magic dies in his hands. Knowing this, he grits his teeth and forces a single, precise incantation, hoping words can stand in for the technique he lacks. Determined to try something different, he remembers how spells are summoned in stories, snaps into a serious stance, slashes the air with a dramatic gesture, spits out an improvised incantation begging the fire spirit for help. Then, with faith and desperation roaring in his chest, he bellows the name again. "Fireball!" He recited the incantation with trembling seriousness and raw hope, but nothing answered. Fury flared when he realized even changing how he pronounced fireball couldn't summon a spark. He exploded with fury, roaring, "It didn't work at all!" as confusion coiled tighter, and he scrambled to figure out what he'd done wrong. Driven to the edge, the protagonist frantically tests everything. He chants the same incantations until his voice cracks, drops to his knees, begging the fire spirit. Hurls every command variation he can think of, mimics the mole's exact casting sound, and even invents a wild, stomping fire dance. Nothing sparks, but he keeps hammering at it, determined to force the magic to life no matter what. Exhausted and seething from one failed attempt after another, the protagonist snaps and vows to walk away from magic, at least for now. Splayed under his makeshift shelter, a cold truth claws at him. The spell demands the world's native tongue, and he, an outsider from another world, can't speak it. With no solution in sight, exhaustion slams into him and he caves, surrendering to sleep. The next day, the protagonist burned with regret. He couldn't wield fire magic, so the fish and rabbit he'd wanted to roast stayed cold. He's just about to cook the old-fashioned way when a goblin explodes from the shadows, claws bared and lunging to shatter his plans once again. He tore through the goblin with shocking ease, then felt the rhythm of this kind of fight sink into his bones. He finds a rabbit and hunger claws at him. He gives up on sparking fire magic. Sick of life on the run, he decides to find a village and break the cycle. And even terrified of parasites, he forces down raw fish, the bitter bite steel forging his resolve to change his life. While sketching out his future, a surge tore through him. He'd just leveled up and unlocked a brand new skill. Rush. He scoured the combat list and found nothing. Then his eyes snapped to the hidden technique. He rips through the description and discovers he can dash at 30% of his attribute speed for up to 5 meters. Elation explodes as he cheers, certain he's finally making real progress. Amped by the new skill, he reaches for rush while standing still. Nothing. Remembering how fire magic failed when he froze, he bolts into motion to try again. The technique clicks. He rockets forward, stunned by his own speed, and after so many failed tries, he at last tastes victory. The protagonist erupts into a triumphant roar the instant they realize rush actually works, launching into wild, uncontained celebration. He feels the skill devour his mana, yet unleash silently without shouting its name. Useless for now, he pictures lethal surprise strikes, but a strange flaw catches his eye. Each time he uses that skill, his shoes rocket off his feet like missiles. Bruised and spent from testing his rush skill, he spots a perfect high perch, goblin-free, with a sparkling river and fruit trees nearby, and, drunk on the comfort, claims it as his new base to recover and gear up for what's next. The protagonist locks his gaze and resolves to dissect his status. He realizes he gains 3 attribute points per level, and figures that if the level cap is 99, his stats could top out around 300. Scans his attributes and sees skills hinge on those numbers. Fire magic feeds off intelligence, rush off agility. He can't remember when dash unlocked and suspects it auto-granted at a certain level. So he abandons fire magic for now and zeroes in on efficient growth. He stares at his skill readout as numbers explode. Earth magic meters swell and his presence detection percent rockets upward with every move. He suspects every time he takes down those horned rabbits his stats spike. Victory turbocharges his growth, powering up not just his combat skills but other useful abilities too. Burning with ambition, he realizes every creature he slays could catapult his evolution. He spots everyday skills, cooking, forging, gathering, woven into the world, and deduces the locals choose their crafts to match the lives they plan to lead. It rips a memory loose, the exact game he used to play. Players could slay monsters, cast lines for fish, drink in stunning vistas, or just let loose and have fun. Just like in the game, he realizes you can live a dozen different lives there, and everyone follows their own path. He remembers his game days, craving nothing but power, and bulldozed the leaderboards to be hailed as the god of cessation across every server. He paid a brutal price for virtual glory. He dropped out of college and was kicked out of his home, but he admits that reckless stretch, consequences and all, was the most fun of his life. This new world fits him like a glove, and its status, skills, and evolution mechanics yank him right back to when he ruled as the top player. Nostalgia and excitement crash through him, tears threatening as the old rush of enthusiasm floods back, like he's standing once more at the peak of his old virtual life. The new world's promise set his blood on fire, but he slammed the brakes and told himself he's an adult now. He won't repeat the mistakes and lose himself like before. He collapses onto the bed, pleading for one good dream tonight. A stolen sliver of peace before the new journey drags him under. The protagonist springs his plan to life, hurling pebbles and mimicking the monster's cries to bait them, then lures them in and makes short work of 2 enemies. Grinning at the flawless plan, he whooped as the stone bait strategy paid off and exploded into a triumphant roar when his level rocketed to 5. Buoyed by his stone bait gambit, he doesn't fear the moles anymore. Cutting them down pours in solid XP, especially for earth magic and presence detection, while unarmed goblins barely give a scrap. And he can't shake the feeling the staff-wielding goblin was a rare spawn. He's never seen another. While reflecting, the protagonist jolts as a distant scream rips the silence. Panic surges. He imagines a monster or goblin until the scream sharpens into a human voice. Alarm slams through him, and he bolts toward the noise, convinced someone, maybe a woman or a child, is under attack, and he plunges in without a second thought to see what's happening. He charged toward the scream when a mole blasted out of the soil. He never broke stride, snapping his foot out and sending the creature careening away. He soon detects the creature erupting from beneath the soil and deduces more must be close. He sprints on, and peering ahead, finally makes out a group of people, the owners of the voice he heard. Zeroing in, he sees 3 children in peril. 2 of them bolt, terror fueling their frantic sprint. The third lunges into the fray, dagger flashing as he keeps the goblins at bay to shield the others. Things are critical, and he knows he must move now to save them. He spots a band of armed goblins charging, one brandishing a jagged sword, and though he'd been dodging group fights until now, he doesn't hesitate, roaring forward to intercept them. He refuses to watch anyone die on his watch. Dread claws at him, but his resolve hardens. He will protect them. The protagonist barreled to the boy who was trying to face the goblins and fired off a blunt plan. "I'll take 2, you handle the rest," leaving the boy frozen, stunned and confused, words caught in his throat. He lunged without hesitation, trusting the other would read his intent and leap into the fight at his side. The boy's eyes flare as the plan snaps into place. He rushes to the protagonist's side, determination burning in his veins, and they lock into combat stances side by side. Eyes blazing, the protagonist lunges first, convinced victory favors those who strike without hesitation, and together they barrel forward, crashing into the goblins with brutal force. He explodes into the fray, his blade cleaving one goblin while a second swing whiffs. He snarls and curses his own failure, burning with frustration. He spots another enemy bearing down. The fight's far from over, so he steels himself, every sense razor sharp. In the heat of battle, a strange calm anchors him, confidence surging as he charges the sword-wielding goblin. Then with a lightning-fast, pinpoint punch, he floors the fiend and sends the blade skittering, proof he's learning to survive in this new world. Wounded and staggering, he grits his teeth, turns agony into fuel, and keeps fighting with iron determination. He channels everything into a thunderous strike and fells the goblin, sending it sprawling, defeated at last. The boy at his side gapes in awe as it hits him. The man just killed a goblin single-handedly. Moments later, a voice snaps his name. Someone's spotted his courage, and the boy sees the goblin hasn't noticed the protagonist. It's locked onto him. He spots the looming finish. If he doesn't move now, the protagonist will end it. Fury explodes and he barrels in to snatch the final blow, desperate to claim the victory as his own. Before the boy can land the final blow, the protagonist lunges like lightning and drives a lethal strike through the goblin, leaving the boy wide-eyed and stunned. Grim-faced, he blurts a sharp apology and vows he won't let them snatch his victory. His grit pays off as his level rockets to 6. The protagonist fixates on the brutal last-hit bonus, a staple of MMORPGs where whoever lands the final blow snatches every reward. He probes whether the system reaches into that other world and realizes it does, but victory tastes hollow. He finally reached that place yet, driven by greed, stole the other boy's chance, and now fears he left a terrible impression. Relief slams into him. He realizes he doesn't need to worry as the 3 youngsters he saved beam and thank him cheerfully, though he can't understand a word they say. Relief washed over him. Then the language barrier hit. He mimed desperately and slowed every word, asking them to wait a moment. They seemed to get it and nodded, goodwill plain on their faces. Desperate to bridge the language gap, he grabs the skill Otherworld Language Comprehension, but level 1 only lets him understand like a 5-year-old. Frustration boils over, so he drops another point and blasts up to level 2. His mind now only grasps things at an 8-year-old's level. Fury erupts as he screams about the tiny improvement, certain he's been cheated. Frustration claws at him after he burns through every free point, but he grits his teeth and hurls another point into language comprehension. Finally, he sees why the group is stunned by his sudden change. Relief surges through him. He thanks them for waiting and presses them for answers about what happened. They gaped at his sudden grasp of the tongue, whispering he'd been praying to the goddess. He scoffed and said he'd only blanked on the language for a heartbeat. He bursts out, "Do you live here?" They revealed they're from nearby Bezart town, had come to the forest to hunt horned rabbits, but goblins ambushed them on the road. Pata snapped the wagon rings, and everyone bolted into the forest. As the 3 erupt into blame over who ran during the attack, Pata insists he only followed orders to sprint straight ahead. May argues she trusted Zinc to defeat the goblins, and Zinc snaps that he couldn't face armed goblins alone. The protagonist soaks it in with a quiet, knowing grin, finding strange comfort as that noisy group somehow becomes a familiar, protective shield. Excitement hit him like a game come to life, but he realized he'd been numbing himself to the brutal truth. No survival experience and no one to rely on meant a single mistake could kill him. Surrounded by city kids, laughing and chattering, a fierce warmth floods him. He finally understands he's not alone. He flashed a fierce grin, gripped her hand, and shot back. "I'm fine!" She presses a hand to her chest in concern, as he admits he was lost but visibly relaxes at finding them, then asks if they can return to Bezart town before sunset. The spiky-haired boy sizes up the scene and snaps they can make it if they hurry. The group sizes up the situation. Pata staggers, sapped from hauling a heavy basket, but they insist they'll be out of the forest before sunset. He barks, "Get out of here now, my flashlight still works!" The crowd explodes with excitement as the kids stare, jaws dropping and cheering wildly at the sleek, modern contraption. The kids swarm the flashlight like it's a magic relic, crowing that his strange clothes must mean he's an aristocrat. He shuts the chatter down, demands focus, and warns that time's running out. Zinc lunged to the lead, spotted the Seer River, declared he knew the way, and pushed to slice through the forest to dodge any delay. Zinc spearheads the group through the forest, then in a heartbeat fells a rabbit with a single razor-precise strike. He methodically wipes his blade in dead silence as the others close in, eyes locked on him. The protagonist, May, and Pato walk just behind, matching his pace. Zinc rips his sword free, shoving the knife aside with a hard glare. No time to gather magic stones or monster parts. He just wants to feel the blade bite. The protagonist gapes at talk of magic stones and body parts, while May explains the 4 stones are tiny and low value but still useful for beginners like them. He snaps back. He's no noble, just a low-class corporate slave. May's eyes light up at the title as she pictures him caring for incredible creatures, and Zinc and Pata grin, convinced he never sold the magic stones because he's rich. May declares they'll band together. Zinc slips into the hunt. She scavenges materials while Potter hauls every last thing. The protagonist watches and realizes they move like a tight, organized team. May, aren't you terrified of venturing into a forest teeming with monsters? She swallows a tremor and admits she's scared, then reveals her family's pharmacy and how some villagers mend wounds with magic. With herbs and fruit already crowding the market and medicines pricey and hard to move, she vows to earn money this way to help her family. The protagonist praises her dedication, and meanwhile he notices something strange about Pada and calls him. Spotting Pada panting and spent, the protagonist's chest tightens and they blurt, "We'll slow down. I'm going at your pace." Pada blurts an apology for being slow. May points out he never had trouble helping on the farm before. But now he's struggling. She reveals Pada still can't understand the protagonist's language and will ask the goddess for the language comprehension skill at the next prayer. And the protagonist nods, intrigued. As the group strides on, Pada blurts he's still struggling with farming, jolting the others. The protagonist says praying to the goddess is like spending skill points. And Zinc, eyes sharp, spots something strange not above the tree but burrowed beneath it. He slams his sword into the earth, explaining that huli moles are hypersensitive to sound and will surface the moment something stirs nearby, and the protagonist's eyes snap open in shocked recognition. The protagonist heaps praise on Zinc's knowledge. Zinc flashes a knowing grin and says he learned everything from his father, a hunter. When asked about future adventures, Zinc declares he'll only ever dare the Rock of Plains, and not until the far future, since brutal monsters rule it. So the protagonist sees he cares more about protecting May and Pada than chasing glory. Zinc confesses he lives with only his mother and must grow stronger, fast, to carry his family on his shoulders. The protagonist reels as the weight hits him. Zinc inherits a deadly job, May stakes her life for money, and Pada sacrifices her studies to slave on the farm. Watching them, the same age as his current form, shoulder-crushing responsibilities, he has to admit the word noble might actually fit. Mid-walk, Zinc's gaze snapped around. Seeing no one had introduced themselves, he barked, "Names now!" In the heat of the moment, he blurts, "Loki," then instantly apologizes for the late introduction. A quiet sign he's already starting to fit into the group. The instant someone says Loki, the 3 youths freeze. Demon Lord Loki detonates in their minds, a name feared across that world. Not fully grasping the fallout, the protagonist blurts a flat, "Eh," stunned that their own reaction blew up so huge. It hit him. Loki, the name he'd blurted without thinking, was the name of his avatar in the game he was addicted to, the one known as the God of Cessation. Loki dominated as the fiercest, most famous player. His legendary name followed him into this new world, a tag that could ignite deadly misunderstandings. Loki sealed his lips with a vow. He'd never tell anyone he came from another world or reveal the status the bun-headed god had granted him. He gets a rush watching his status skyrocket and admits he's addicted to snatching the finishing blow in fights. He never meant to lie about his name, yet he can feel himself sinking deeper into this new world without even realizing it. Whenever he storms into the new world, Loki crackles with excitement, hungry for skills and endless possibility, and he admits he chose the name Loki because it fit. It captures his fire and ties back to his life as a player. Now he cringes at that name, embarrassing to hear. but it perfectly echoed the way he moved and the feelings raging inside him then. Shock sears Loki as he realizes his chosen name has everyone convinced he's the demon lord himself. He reels, stunned at how it all spiraled, as the three point out the tale's demon lord fits him perfectly, black clothes and all. To them he's not a noble but the demon lord. And now Loki must wrestle with the fame he accidentally ignited. Loki's suspicion ignites. The creature with the bun-shaped head lured him into this world to forge him into the demon lord. Hungry for answers, he leans in and demands the full story behind the demonic Loki. Zinc snaps back, unleashing the raw tale of how the demon lord was subdued. And everyone freezes as they remember he used to wear that exact outfit in secret. From the dark, the demon lord rose, cloaked in black, and rallying monsters as he poured out terror and ruin. A hero then fell from the light, swinging his sacred sword and bathing the world in a blinding holy glow. The whole city sings that famous name, and Loki suddenly realizes that by taking it, even unintentionally, he's just painted a bullseye on his back. Everyone else shrugs it off as a heroic legend, but to him the pieces snap into place with chilling clarity. Loki hears about Takuya, the legendary hero who appeared out of nowhere, came from another world, and vanquished the Demon King. Everyone else worships him like a god, but the name slams into Loki like a lightning strike. Takuya was someone from his past life, and the coincidence rattles him as a cold suspicion takes root. None of this is accidental. Rage boiled in Loki as the summoner dished out skills to everyone else but left him with nothing. Meanwhile, people buzzed with curiosity about those from another world, imaginations igniting wild dreams of racing to the capital to meet one. Zinc slams the brakes on her excitement, snarling they can barely scrape together the cash for that. Loki's suspicion ignites. He might not be the only one dragged here from another world. Loki locks onto a mole up ahead and screams a warning. Zinc rockets forward to charge one head-on, while Loki tears into another on the right and May and Pata vanish into hiding at once. Plunged into the heart of the fray, Loki felt a strange, fierce satisfaction. This chaos was exactly the kind of challenge he'd expected from this new world. Loki remembers when he played alone, chasing nothing but cold efficiency. Now he watches a united crew, each nailing their role and sharing the spoils with open, joyful grins. Watching Zinc, May, and Pata, he stares at the dawning future of this new world, and, for the first time, senses that beyond cold numbers there could be something real. Friendship. After a grueling struggle, the group burst from the forest into blinding sunlight, collapsing with relief. Exhausted, but safe. Relief crashes over them and they explode into ecstatic cheers. Seeing Pata falter, Loki strides up, hoists the heavy basket form onto his shoulders, and proves he's finally becoming one of them, ready to back his new companions. At last, Loki and the others laid eyes on Bezart town on the distant horizon as the sunset bled across the sky, sealing the end of their long, grueling journey. May erupts into a radiant smile, thanking him for joining them. At the sight of the town gate, Zinc, May, and Pata bolt toward the guard, while Loki watches, impressed by their speed. The guard recognizes them and scolds them for being out so late. Loki steps forward, curious about the reception, and the group reunites, relief and joy flooding them. The guard's voice erupts with gratitude as he thanks Loki for saving the three youths. Loki shrugs and spins it as, "We just helped each other in the forest." And the conversation snaps to the sword used by a goblin. Zinc snaps that it's brand new and meticulously kept, sending suspicion racing through the room, and the guard runs a finger along the blade, his jaw dropping at its pristine edge and flawless craftsmanship. Loki stands under the guard's formal welcome to Bezart as they fling open the gates, hail him as the children's hero and savior, and beckon him inside. He bursts through the gates and is met by a bustling, welcoming town, the first step of his new journey into an unknown world. Loki thrusts the sword at Zinc, insisting it's too long for him, and since Zinc was saved too, he won't keep it. Zinc snaps back he can't wield it either, and they lock into a tense standoff. The guard barges in, cutting them off. "You can continue this at the Hunters Guild tomorrow." Loki bids them farewell as the group erupts in thanks, crowning him their savior, while whispers still tag him an aristocrat, or worse, a demon lord. The guard barked at Loki to come with him to the guild the next day, to report the case of the sword-wielding goblin. With everything settled, the group disperses in cheerful chatter and strides through the town, Loki watching with a slight smile. A thunderbolt of realization strikes Loki. He only gained skills from the mole he took down alone, proving the finishing blow awards all the experience. A hard truth slams into him. Dependence will choke his growth, and though he loved the group's company, he steels himself to abandon making friends if he wants real strength. Loki finally storms into town, dead set on swapping his gear, and though he toyed with recruiting a crew, he knows he can't expect teammates to save the finishing blow for him. The town thrums with life, and as he takes it all in, a feral hunger claws through him. Above all else, he wants meat. Loki rushes to a food stall to snag a bite, then freezes when the vendor names a price in a currency he doesn't recognize. Beaky, clueless about the local currency and completely broke, he crushes his pride and bellows to his group of friends, desperately begging them to lend him money. He's 32. The protagonist jolts awake, disoriented, in an unfamiliar place ringed by gnarled branches. Voices cut through his fog and he looks down, only to realize he's perched high in a tree. A crowd staring up in shock and relief that he's alive as he scrambles to piece together the commotion he must have caused during that impossibly complicated night. After ripping free of the forest, he breaks from the others and scrambles to adapt to the alien streets. But without the local coin, he can't buy a decent bed or even a proper meal. He collapses to sleep outdoors, memories snapping into place. He's stuck in a game world and jaw tight, accepts the brutal hardships ahead. Back in town, a girl spots him, bolts over and, breathless, says she'd been looking for him. They reunited, and she cracked a grin, playfully scolding him for sleeping in a tree and saying she would have sheltered him if he'd asked, while he sheepishly admitted he only realized he was out of money after they'd parted. Her excitement yanks him forward as she cries, "To the Hunters Guild! The others must already be waiting!" He bursts into the Hunters Guild and gapes at the sprawling, pulsing hall, tables jammed, servers darting with steaming plates, spots the famed mission board and realizes those papers were quest requests. Rejoining the group, they say they came earlier and already ate, and he mumbles an apology while fighting the urge to snatch a bite of the irresistible food. Starving for days, he begs for a piece of meat and vows to repay the favor. The first bite explodes with flavor and lifts him into rapturous bliss. The juiciness and seasoning slammed into him like a revelation. He crowned it the perfect fantasy world feast, and his satisfaction burst out so loudly he froze, stunned to hear whose voice had just spilled from his own mouth. He's still savoring his meal when an elegant woman snaps his name across the room, reminds him of yesterday's brutal mess, and says the guildmaster wants to see him. He jerks upright, blurts, "Are you from the guild?" And a cold knot of nerves tightens in his gut. Masking his nerves with a bold grin, he agrees and slips into step behind her, his mind racing through every possible reason she might have called. A guide ushers the protagonist into a hush-filled room, and there, at last, the master of the Bezart Hunters Guild awaits. The man announced himself as Yagov, apologized for the sudden call, and, polite but blunt, thrust out his left hand for a handshake. The protagonist, struck by the odd gesture, returned the grip with respectful steadiness, feeling the heavy weight of the moment. He declared, "I'm Loki," and thrust his hand forward, locking grips with Guildmaster Yagov in a firm, unflinching handshake. He plants himself facing him. Amanda suddenly slides in at his side, and he goes rigid with discomfort. Yagov wastes no time. He thrusts something into the protagonist's hands and locks eyes like a storm, making it crystal clear there's urgent business to settle. Yagov thrusts a heavy, jingling bag of coins into the protagonist's hands. The mayor thrusts a reward at him to thank him for saving the children. Stunned, the protagonist scrambles to explain it was on impulse and tries to refuse, then admits the money will be a lifeline because he has no resources, thanks from the heart, and Yagov steps in to make it official recognition of his deeds, even as an outsider. Yagov presses a guild hunter offer on him. The protagonist admits the job fits like a glove, then falters and declares he won't be staying in town long. Yagov lays it out. The Hunters Guild is an independent, nationally recognized force, and one registration counts overseas. His blunt, respectful delivery jolts the protagonist into seriously weighing the proposal. Mid-conversation, Yagov snaps, You can tell where someone's from just by watching the way their mouth moves. He fixed a serious stare and announced the protagonist's speech was unlike any he'd ever heard, making the protagonist freeze, realizing he'd stuck out more than he'd meant to, then grit his teeth and admit there was still so much to learn in this strange new world. Yagov reveals that 2 hunters vanished 10 days ago while hunting in the Great Palmyra Forest, and he grimly adds that one of them had restored a sword before the mission. He grills the protagonist, demanding a full, detailed account of what he was doing in that forest, since he's not a registered hunter. He felt their questions like knives, saw suspicion pointing straight at him. He almost lied, but knew a lie would only tighten the trap, so he squared his shoulders and snapped, "I didn't kill the missing hunters," and, without explaining why he'd been in the forest, insisted that if he'd done something that monstrous, he never would have dared show his face in town. He swears he saw a goblin gnawing on what looked like a human arm just 3 or 4 days ago. Yagov grimly declares the hunters almost certainly dead. The protagonist steps up to return the sword he ripped from a goblin and scours the wreckage for their bodies to hand to any families, only for Yagov to reveal the two have no close relatives and to grant the blade to him. Yagov snapped. He wasn't accusing the protagonist. He only needed to know what happened, since incidents like that are baked into a hunter's deadly risks. He snapped the conversation shut, announcing the registration desk opens at noon and pressing the protagonist to join the guild. He flashes a sincere smile, says best regards, and strides off, leaving a crisp, respectful, cordial impression behind. He stepped out of the room, rattled, questioning Yagov's motives. Was the guildmaster trying to tug at his heart by mentioning the hunter's remains? Then Yagov's eyes hit him like a memory, the same ever-smiling, respected gaze of his old company director, trusted by younger people. Replaying Yagov in his head, the protagonist reverses course. The man's friendly smile is a mask. His eyes are cold and empty, and that void makes him instantly suspicious. He decides he doesn't like Yagov and yanks back everything he thought before. Inside the room, Amanda smirks that the kid's far too perceptive for his age. Yagov narrows his eyes, suspecting he might be tied to a shadowy group called Those Four, though doubt still gnaws at him. Amanda slammed her report into the master's hands. The protagonist wore strange shoes, a watch, and glasses shaped like nothing anyone had seen, matching the lost artifacts unearthed 4 years ago and classified as second-class secret relics, and his watch still ticked, which set off alarm bells. Yagov snapped that anyone who found such items in the forest would hide them, or at least say where they came from, yet the man claimed them like heirlooms, and Yagov's distrust hardened. Yagov snaps at Amanda, "Don't cross the line, this one's cunning," and orders her to shadow every boy's moves and report back, then stares out at the town, unsettled that the protagonist would take a demon king's name and burning to unmask the young man's true purpose. Suspicion gnawed at him, but Yagov clung to a sliver of hope that Loki's presence might jolt the town out of its long stagnation, and with a firm, steady stare he pleaded, "Please be good to us, Loki." He weighed his fate, and knew joining the Hunters Guild might be his only lifeline to survive in that world. Suspicion clung to him and he distrusted the guild leader, yet he swore he could thrive there. Fueled by that thought, he storms back into the main hall as the others erupt in raucous cheers. The decision is sealed. He'll throw himself into this new world. He bursts back into the group, throwing a glittering pile of coins on the table, the mayor's reward, and proudly declares he had that money right from the start. Their jaws dropped at the mountain of cash, stunned by the brutal power money held. He shrugged and said it was a thank you for saving the children, barely aware of how huge his deed truly was. I warned penalties could hit on emergency runs, but they shrugged it off as rare, and one girl laughed that if this were a real emergency, they'd be pocketing even more money. The blonde boomed that there was no time to make it official. The pay was just a thank you. He insisted hunters exist to help, not to be paid. Yet the room turned lively when the protagonist slapped the coin pouch down and dragged everyone off for meat skewers, even as a cold suspicion about the guild leader kept nagging at him. He strides up to the guild's registration desk and meets Amanda, who introduces herself as the receptionist, then drops that she's the guild's third in command and beams because he remembered her name. Spotting her clout, he figures winning her favor will score future perks, practically vibrating as he blurts, "How do I register?" And she, mildly impatient, snaps she only needs his name and age. Facing the registration form, he freezes. One stroke of Loki will officially bind him to that name and slam shut any chance of turning back. He swallowed hard, summoned every scrap of courage, and began scrawling across the form. Amanda asked if he even knew how to write. He mumbled, voice thin with doubt, but forced himself to keep going, and she said the card would be ready soon. Then dove into an animated run-through of how the guild operates. The guild briefing hit like a cold splash. Everyone kicks off at rank G, the absolute bottom. He asked where he landed, and Amanda cut the suspense. You'll start there too. 7 ranks tower from G up to S crowning the top. Hunters usually only take missions that match their rank, yet the guildmaster can grant a 1-level jump. Since the protagonist already felled an armed goblin, he's likely to win that approval, though he steels himself to slog through a string of simple manual labor tasks at first. The protagonist presses Amanda about guild promotions. She snaps that you climb by contributing and proving your skills. You start at rank B with a hands-on practical exam, and to reach rank S, you must pass an interview with the central guildmaster. She booms that climbing the ranks demands brutal, relentless effort. Finishing basic missions won't cut it. A cold truth slams into him. The guild bows only to merit. The harder he grinds, the bigger the payoff. He's electrified. This is a breath of fresh air compared to the exploitative workplace he escaped. Knowing he'll risk his life as a hunter, he stares down the new world's savage truth with iron resolve. Moments later, his official registration card slaps into his palm. The official guild card snaps into his palm as officials proclaim him a new hunter. Amanda beams, saying she's eager for his future triumphs and ready to help with any question he has. She announced the master had ordered her to watch over me since I'm new in town. My jaw dropped, and a warm rush of belonging flooded through me. Curiosity blazing, the protagonist leans in and asks where the best hunting spots are. Amanda steers beginners into the first layer of the Great Palmera Forest, practically deserted and perfect for starters, then points eager players to the Raqqa Plains and Lulu Forest to rank up faster. He leaned in, thrilled to hear the forest hid mysterious zones even the locals didn't know. Amanda said the shallow edges only churn out weak-horned rabbits and goblins, but push deeper and far deadlier things wait. Amanda leans in and lays out the Great Palmera Forest. The first layer seems perfect for beginners, but vicious hollows force everyone to steer clear. It takes about 60 days to reach the second layer, and from the third layer on monster strength locks to set levels. The forest sprawls across a quarter of the continent, and until today, only the Birdmen tribe had ever breached its fabled 5th layer. Now the protagonist stands breathless, struck by its towering grandeur and the secrets whispering from its shadows. He pegged the Great Palmera Forest as the final dungeon straight out of a game, looming, deadly, and tucked away right beside the starting village. Bursting with enthusiasm, he fires off another question. Can low-rank hunters take down higher-rank monsters? Amanda shoots back that even a win earns no mission rewards unless the quest was officially accepted. And when he thanks her, she bristles, snapping that he's suddenly too cute. He says he'll accept a smaller reward if there's no penalty. Amanda's head jerks up, suspicion blazing, and she fires a blunt question. Do you intend to venture into the deeper layers of the Great Palmera Forest? He tries to pass it off as a distant goal, but his eyes betray him. Amanda snaps that recklessness has no place among hunters, and the guild grants no benefits to those who irresponsibly overstep their level. But she still lets him move on to the next question. After firing off several questions, Amanda tells him the guild's document room holds the answers, and when he spots the dusty tomes, his excitement explodes. Then she smiles sinisterly and warns that those priceless books could condemn him to eternal slavery if he so much as tears a page. Fear clawed at his chest, gratitude warmed his voice, and he vowed to move with razor-sharp caution. Stepping out of the guild, he let a long, relieved breath go. No records ruined, and the truth hit him hard. Paper was priceless here. As he walked, he kept picturing how one careless tear would have spelled disaster. Moments later, his phone buzzes, and an ecstatic colleague gushes, "Hey, did you finish registering?" He grins and fires back, "Done. I'm officially in," thrilled to finally be part of the team. They hawked the gathered goods and split the pay evenly, 5 to 500 biki each, when a teammate suggested selling the sword and invited him along. He agreed on the spot and said he wanted to swing by the weapon shop too. They barrel through the city streets, chatting nonstop as they race toward the place. At the weapon shop, he hammered down his demand, 80,000 biki for the sword, arguing it had been hell to obtain and the value would be split among 4 people. The blacksmith plants his feet, unmoved by their haggling, slaps down a cold 50,000, then snaps that he must turn a profit and can't pay much for a used sword. His final bid, 40,000 beek, split it among yourselves. Suspicion lacing his voice, the protagonist pressed the blacksmith, asking if he planned to resell the sword at the market. The man confirmed it, and a cunning plan ignited in the protagonist's mind. The protagonist storms the blacksmith and demands 60,000 biki, insisting the sword would fetch 100,000 biki on the market so the merchant would still profit. But the blacksmith digs in his heels and refuses to pay a coin more until he sells the weapon. He drops the bomb. He bought that sword at the very shop just 10 days ago. It's second-hand but top tier, praised even by the guards, and suddenly the conversation swings in his favor. Smirking, the protagonist slams 72,000 biki onto the table and snaps that if they don't accept, he'll hand the sword to another friend. Under crushing pressure, the blacksmith finally gave in and accepted the offer. The protagonist, exhausted from the brutal negotiation, threw his head back and roared in triumph. The merchant snaps that he should have named the price from the start. Moments later, the protagonist zeroes in on the knife, proving he isn't finished. At last, he snatches his starter kit, 2 sets of simple clothes for 3,000 biki, boots for 40,000, and a web. He paid $50,000 after snagging a sweet discount, grinning at the fair prices and vowing he'd never haggle again, only at that shop. Now outfitted like a true commoner, he feels ready to set off on his new journey. With a bed guaranteed for 3,000 biki per night, he collapses onto it, relief roaring in his chest and a satisfied grin crowning his hard-won progress. He drank in every detail and learned the rhythms of local life. A bell pounding out the hours, hearths fed with crackling magic stones, paper so rare people scrawled on wooden boards, and each discovery lit a fire in him. So eager for what lay ahead, he set off again to continue his journey. He bursts back into the guild to confirm the special permission he just secured for the F-rank mission, and Amanda beams, declaring he looks fresh-faced and downright handsome. Her tone hardens into steel as she reminds him he's still a novice and must form a group before departing. He reels at the sudden shift and vows he'll do his best. Amanda urged him to bring backup, but he brushed her off and went solo. He knew a group would make it easier. Yet the hunger for fast cash and a refusal to split the spoils burned in him. So sure of himself, he plunged into Palmera Forest without forming a team. He slips through the city gate. A guard calls him out as a hunter, but his jaw hardens. This mission will be solo. As he steps out from the mission, the guard's warning snaps like a whip. Be back before nightfall. He sees worry in their faces and is momentarily surprised, then flashes a confident grin, answers with eager vigor, and storms into the forest, determined to face the challenge alone. He plunges into the first layer of the great Palmera Forest, sizing up the most efficient prey, horned rabbits or goblins, calculating which yields more, and, alone, considers farming magic stones since they're light and easy to carry. Caution coils around him as he declares today a test to learn the lay of the land. Then a rabbit darts from the brush and he tenses, poised to act. He locks onto a horned rabbit and barrels into attack, his level up sharpening his senses so he reads every twitch, then tries a new strike and nails it dead center. Stunned by his own strength, he realized the status blessing had made him far stronger than he'd ever imagined. Ordinary in name, he now felt ready to tackle the world's challenges. He charges the goblin with blazing confidence, a fierce grin blooming as he knows his current power is more than enough to crush this foe without breaking a sweat. Excitement flooded him as the battle began, joy detonating inside like a gamer, finally clearing a grueling grind and hitting a long-awaited level up, the most exhilarating rush he'd ever felt. Triumphant from victory, the protagonist plunges deeper into the hunt. An hour later, he's wrecked, exhausted, caked in grime and shaken to his core. Perched in the forest with his enemy's body at his side, He fights back tears as the world's brutal truth crashes down on him, and the rush that once lit him curdles into bone-deep exhaustion and queasy revulsion at the violence he'd faced. He ripped into the monster's carcass to harvest materials, but the fetid stench, the slick, squelching textures under his hands, and the nightmarish sight hit him like a punch, and bile rose in his throat. He'd only ever seen this in neat school science videos. Then reality slammed into him. It's uglier, harder, and far more traumatic, and his clumsy, unskilled hands only make everything worse as he frantically wrestles with the scene's brutal chaos. Exhausted and filthy, the protagonist finally pried the magic stone from the goblin's body and cradled it in trembling hands. Stunned he'd wasted so long on one foe, he stared at the last proof of subjugation, the goblin's hand, and, disgusted, drove the blade into the joint, forcing himself to finish as the brutal reality shook him. Blood drenched him, and exhaustion crushed him as he stared at his grimy hands, finally realizing how badly he'd underestimated hunting alone. Amanda's warning slams into him like a slap. Ashamed, he admits he was a fool as reality presses down, then staggers to the river and scrubs the blood from his skin. Realizing he never considered the brutal, practical costs of battle, and his lone wolf illusion begins to shatter against the harsh real world. Blood-soaked and spent, the protagonist slams into his limit, burning with the realization he badly underestimated the danger of fighting alone and furious. He'd thought it would be easy, the brutal truth crushing him. But he refuses to surrender, wipes the blood from his hand so the knife won't slip, forces himself onward, and shouts inwardly that he'll reach his goal today no matter what. Back at the guild, he slams his haul from the hunt onto the table. Amanda's eyes go wide at the mountain of loot, and she showers him with praise, especially for taking down an armed goblin. She stares at him, dirt and dried blood smeared across his skin, and blurts out how wrecked he looks. He flushes with embarrassment, scrambles to mask the pain, and stands utterly spent from the brutal ordeal. Back from the mission, he asks what gear beginners truly need, and gets a scolding. Ripped for going out alone, without water, carrying nothing but a weapon and a basket, and left with nothing to say. He's marched straight to the sink to wash his hands. After cleaning up, he let out a wry laugh at the scolding. In that young frame, he truly looked like a boy being told off. Still reeling from the hunt's grisly sights, the protagonist's appetite collapses. The attendant thrusts juicy, sizzling meat skewers at him to cheer him up, but his mind fixates on the dead goblin. He asks for nothing but water, begging for it ice cold as he fights to drag his battered mind back from the edge after that draining, traumatic day. Eyes fixed on a sweating glass of iced water, he clung to silence and forced his breath to steady. An employee spotted the strain and asked if something was wrong, and he denied it, burying the crushing weight of what he'd experienced. He sat in the heart of the bustling hall, a lone island amid the crowd, swallowed by his own thoughts while the noise buzzed around him. Eyes sweeping the alien surroundings, the protagonist spots a bespectacled man, and his thoughts ignite. Even though he's in another world, the city gleamed with modern life, and lamps and utensils slammed him with memories of Earth. He's no history expert, but a flash of clarity hits. Of course this world would forge its own different technologies. While resting, he envisioned transmigrators like him reshaping this new world with Earth's knowledge. He let others shoulder the big changes and focused only on the tasks before him. He gulps the water, raves about how refreshing it is, then thrusts the hunting spoils across the counter for processing. Every guild clerk's head snaps up. The guild crew burst into stunned whispers. He'd ripped the magic stone free on his very first try. They're convinced his relentless grind will profit everyone, while he's oblivious and already laser-focused on amassing 550,000 biki to snatch a short sword. He sizes up 3 hunting areas, the familiar first layer of Palmera Forest where horned rabbits, goblins, and burrowing moles attack, and Roca Plains, still within his level but swarming with praying mantises that wield wind magic and poisonous rats. Recommended for rank F, he plots strategies before trying. Luluve Forest is far deadlier. Spiders that spit 50 Samson-thick sticky threads, wolf packs that swarm like hungry storms, and towering orcs prowl its depths. It demands rank E, and he admits he's not strong enough to face those monsters yet. Loki scans the monsters around Bizarre City and realizes that, aside from the brutal chore of ripping enemies limb from limb, fighting in Palmyra is almost easy for him. His real headache is knowing when to change hunting grounds. Games let you wander risk-free, but this is real life and he can't play like that. Loki snatches up the collected materials. He pockets a staggering 40,500 beaky from a half-day hunt. Floored by the haul, he blurts out whether material quality bumps the payout. The evaluator nods and lays it out. 5 ranks from E up to A, and every rabbit Loki dragged in scored a solid B. Loki pressed for tips to better preserve the hunted materials and was warned not to overdo it and to rest. Amanda fretted, but his determination blazed on. He's convinced that if he sharpens his efficiency and snags top-tier gear, he could pull in up to 100,000 bicky a day. And even while admitting his limits, a white-hot urgency claws at him to evolve soon. Amanda summons Loki for a hunting lesson. He tries to escape, claiming he needs to buy supplies, but she refuses to let him off, insisting he stay and warning him not to do anything reckless. At last, she thrusts the item she'd forgotten to hand him earlier into his grip. Loki eyes the church with a grin. He can check his own status anytime, but curiosity about how others do it nags him. His gaze lands on a church coin and realization snaps into place. It's what others use to check status. Then a colleague sidles up and asks if he's already finished the day's hunt. Loki meets his colleague's eyes, gathers his things, and strides for the exit. When Loki finds out his friend hasn't checked his status in 2 years, he jams the church coin Amanda gave him into the man's hand, declaring he won't need it anytime soon and it'd be a waste to keep. And when the friend hesitates to accept a free gift, Loki presses it on him and snaps, "Don't worry about it." Loki slides a coin across the altar, and in return snaps for the lowdown on how the city's status verification works. The boy grins. It's simple, and a blackboard blooms with letters ranking every learned skill by level. Loki gets it, but worries his curiosity about the local system might be too flimsy a reason. As they pore over the skills on the board, a girl suddenly belts out her abilities, and panic rips through Loki. He snaps, cutting her off and warning it's dangerous to blurt that in public. Another boy adds his father's grim warning that people with rare skills get snatched and enslaved, so the girl clamps her mouth shut and vows to hide her talent. They were roaring with chatter in front of the church when a stern nun swooped in, scolding them for the racket and barking for them to quiet down. She calms, greets him with keen curiosity about the new boy. They name Loki the new hunter. The others admit they were just figuring out how to check status, and the nun beams a warm welcome, saying he can ask about the church anytime. Loki plastered on a rehearsed smile and vowed he'd throw himself into hunting monsters. The nun praised his manners and declared he had a promising future. She presses him. Always walk the path of virtue. The goddess watches without fail, and blessings chase down anyone who does right. Loki replayed the nun's words, sneered that the acorn-headed thing didn't count as a goddess, and gave himself permission to move. Chores teach a little, but hunting monsters carves new skills fastest. He bids his friends goodbye and bolts into town to go shopping before dinner. Loki stumbles back into the inn, utterly spent, and exhales in relief when he sees fish for dinner. He's fed up with meat. The stench of monster corpses and the gush of blood when they were sliced slammed into him and nearly made him puke. And he realized that even if it feels like a game, hunting monsters is still killing living beings. And that truth twisted his gut. Sitting before the lantern's glow, Loki fixes a hard, unblinking stare on the world. After all he's survived, he knows it's real. A mocking barb from someone he knows snaps into place, and the brutal, tactile truth of this new world slams into him. Loki watched everyone ignore the final blow. To him, that strike meant everything. Experience and skill were forged in that last hit. It hits him like a knockout. The others don't know, and they don't have to fight to survive like he does. The revelation rips his world open. He's alone in his logic, forced to grow out of necessity while everyone else drifts through routines. Loki's heart spikes. He's got a game-changing edge. He can read exact levels and detailed skill stats, while everyone else only sees which skills they have, no numbers attached. He grins at the world like a rigged game, a glowing cheat code. and vows to exploit it to level up faster than anyone, even if he has to turn reality into a cold progress bar. Loki confronts his cold, calculating heart. Knowing people care, he still shuts them out to fuel his climb, admitting he'd even exploit others if it meant getting ahead. The reason's obvious. In this new world, he can rise to a power he never dreamed possible in his old life. Alone, memories of his old world slam into Loki like a tidal wave, and he finally realizes his quest for power has become a ravenous force devouring him. He stares down the darkness closing in, the choice a boulder on his chest. Wordlessly, he pleads to be returned to his original world, and as the light gutters, a brutal truth slams in. Press on and corruption will claim him. Loki's jaw drops when he learns his name once belonged to an ancient demon king, slain by a hero from another world, and the shock drags him into a savage reckoning with who he really is. A dark grin splits his face as he confesses he's no hero. Staring down his fate, consumed by a storm of thought, he concedes that if he keeps on this path, he'll become the next demon king and rule the world. Anger crackled at the entity that dragged him into this world. He clenched his fist, vowed to live for no one but himself, and accepted his summoning without needing answers. He teeters on the edge of confession, reveal his true origin to the friends he's made, or bury the secret forever. He snaps awake, utterly spent, feet leaden and aching. He reaches to stand, but his body shudders with weakness. Slumped, sweat trickling down his temples, he realized he'd pushed his body of just 14 years past its limit. Regret carved his face as he admitted he'd been reckless. No orders in the new world, so he goes rogue and charges out alone, only to have his body betray him as his stamina collapses. Messages? None. Instructions? None. He spots the stamina value ripped from his status and, with no choice left, charges into training, running every single day for the last 3 days. Just as he prepped for a light training day, a scream shredded the silence, and moments later, he saw someone being attacked in the forest. He rockets toward the danger, eyes locking on the person in trouble, then hurls himself into harm's path to pull them to safety. They burst onto the scene, braced to help, then stop cold. It's already under control. They swept aside their foes with effortless grace. One of them beamed, thanked him for worrying, and praised his kindness. And bashful, he asked if they were okay. They answered with a rousing yes. Back in the village, the protagonist retells the ordeal and earns thunderous praise for the woman's fearless stand against the enemies. He raced back early, basket piled high, and when they questioned his speed, he coolly said, "I met my goal." The old man watching him nodded. Those whispers about his talent were true. He confesses he wants to vanish into the crowd, refusing to draw a single gaze. He's stockpiling cash to buy weapons, armor, and gear so he can someday explore the Rock of Plains, and he reckons he'll need about 1.5 million biki. The man gapes at the haul, warning that chasing that sum will make him stand out, and snarls that most city hunters just hawk leftovers for pocket change. Nothing like the blood and sweat grind the protagonist endures. The man warns him that even if he dodges the spotlight, turning in monster materials day after day will draw eyes and burnish his guild reputation. And the protagonist realizes hawking those parts to specialty shops would net far bigger profits. They warned him that carrying gold everywhere was a ticking trap and told him to lock it in the guild vault. But he fired back that the coins decide his rank. He has to keep them on him. Shock slammed into him when he realized he could stash his gold coins in the guild. He conjures a ridiculous scene. Thieves burst in, carting off all the money. Fury snaps as he scolds Amanda in his head for never telling him something so important. Now coinless, he sneers at the irony and finally feels the sting of the risk he ran. Strolling through the city, he spots someone leaving a shop and curiosity ignites. A flash of glitter reveals a jewelry store. He stares, gets distracted, slams into a passerby, and blurts a quick apology. Curiosity burning, he pushed inside, and a mysterious woman stood there, greeting him with a single, quiet, "Welcome." He steps inside, jaw dropping as every glittering gem thrums with magic. The woman narrows her eyes and snaps, "Buying or selling?" Clueless about the subject, he seizes her offer to explain and leans in, curiosity burning as he probes the value and uses of those items. She slams her palm down and fires the truth. Each magic stone screams a color-bound power. Black has no attribute. Red bursts with fire, and the others hide their own. She flashes examples and declares ordinary, attribute-less stones are used every day. He recognizes some and jolts, proof that attribute-bearing magic stones are real. And when she forces him to picture bigger, pricier stones in play, a cold suspicion sparks that something far more important is hiding behind it. He unearthed that magic stones could forge potent attributes into his gear. The protagonist's heart thundered at the idea of wielding two swords, each thrumming with a different element. He practically trembles picturing the carnage he could unleash, and the woman snaps him back. Stones are still way too pricey for a rookie with only a knife. One of the men pipes up about a bazaar shop that specializes in enchantments, and she smiles, admitting he pictured exactly that. His breath stopped when a tiny magic stone fetched 50,000 beaky, wildly higher than he'd ever expected. The seller smirks and says earth stones go for pennies. They're only good for construction, while fire and ice are the coveted ones, then teases him to come back with coin, calling him future hunter, and he nods, jaw tight with frustration. He trudged, bone-deep tired, counting the coin he'd need for the barest gear, then stumbled onto weapons humming with magic, and a tidal rush of possibilities slammed him, igniting fierce visions of how he'd use them in combat. He conjures blistering combos of spells and blades in his mind, then lets out a soft sigh and declares, "Dinner time." A fierce scent slams into him. He snaps to a halt, stunned, then, recognizing it, he rockets toward its source, and when he arrives, a lush, culturally exotic scene unfurls before him, and he whoops that this is exactly the place he'd imagined. The protagonist bursts into the restaurant, eyes sparkling with excitement, and proclaims he knows curry. The chef, all elegance and theater, announces an exclusive menu of nothing but a spice-packed curry for 9,000 BK per portion, then stops me before I sit, stares me down and snarls, "Do you have the guts to face something this fierce?" He winced at the sky-high price, but craving clawed at him. He fell to his knees and begged for a portion, vowing he'd pay. When the dish landed before him, the unmistakable aroma and sight of curry struck him like lightning. His eyes gleamed, his heart swelled, and he declared it curry without a doubt as the chef smiled in approval. The protagonist dove into the curry, every spoonful igniting a rush of nostalgia as memories of eating this for quick lunches at work crashed back. An explosion of spice detonated inside him, the dish scorching his mouth into pure pain. Yet through tears and sweat he tasted a hidden, glorious flavor and kept devouring it, utterly enchanted. Sweat beading and his face burning red, the protagonist couldn't stop shoveling food in, devouring each portion with rapturous delight before leaning back stuffed and grinning to thank them for the meal. He burst out of the restaurant recharged, his heart glowing. Then the bill hit him. 9,000 beaky per dish. Brutal, while he was trying to save 1.5 million. He strode off, grinning. No regrets. The taste alone made it worth every risk. That familiar flavor sparked a sudden suspicion. Could there be more people in this world who'd come from Earth too? He savored that curry like a victory, supremely spiced and insanely good. But the bill slammed him, so he vowed to make it a rare reward, knowing he'd been lucky this time and swearing to think twice before ducking into any random shop again. He stepped into a new shop and a warm couple flung open their smiles to welcome him. The woman said she was Mesa's mother and thanked him for taking care of her daughter, and the man declared he was the father. Recognition hit him like a punch. He'd seen them before, and he snapped to the truth. This was a pharmacy, which made sense because Mesa's parents harvested herbs and spent most of their time in the forest. Mesa's exploded into view, shouting with giddy joy the moment he saw you and beckoning you to play by the river tomorrow. She flashed a grin and promised it'd be a blast. Pleasant, sparkling water, even a shot at fishing. She'd invite other friends too. Then she sprinted off before I could answer. Her mother apologized, confessing she'd always behaved that way, while the protagonist, still dazed, murmured that it felt like being swept into a sudden storm. The hunt gnawed at him, but he fell in with Misa and her friends toward the river, mulling whether their trust sprang from all the times he'd helped them. He could see his own status, but he owned up to being far from invincible. Zinc, he insisted, was stronger and more dependable, yet Mice's parents still clasped his hands in gratitude, trusting the group's safety whenever he stood nearby. Mesa's mother handed the protagonist a bottle of potent, glowing special medicine. She said it would melt his muscle pain and banish fatigue, perfect for a man who runs every day like him. Stunned, he asked the price, but she refused payment, saying it was her thanks for saving her daughter from goblins. He shoved money forward for the medicine, but Mesa's mother flatly refused, calling it just a leftover bottle and refusing any hefty sum. And when her expression flickered, doubt burned. Had she given him nothing but a placebo? He reversed course in a heartbeat. If even the curry carried a high price tag, the medicine had to be made from rare herbs, so he dared expect the remedy would work wonders. He flashed a grateful grin, vowed he'd rush back to buy more if the medicines worked, then seized the moment to ask for something to ease his stomach pain. He burst out of the pharmacy. Two figures down the block locked onto him with recognition flashing across their faces, and he looked ready to head off to the next event with his friends. The group roared toward the river, Mesa blazing ahead with unstoppable energy as she led the charge, and Loki grinned that he'd grabbed the cheapest fishing rod but swore it would work. Zink barked for the items to be shoved into Pata's basket and warned he'd cut ahead with Loki to scout the surroundings as a precaution during the journey. The protagonist, already moving, couldn't stop wondering how long it would take to reach their destination. He asked how long to the river and gaped when they said, about 2 hours. The group cheerfully followed the trail as he drank in the untamed scenery, marveling at how wild the world felt, while Pata, heaving the basket, grumbled it was too much work just to play. At the river, Mesa fixated on the water, eyes sparkling with excitement, while the weary protagonist burst into a relieved laugh. Despite his efforts, he hadn't caught a single thing, so Zink called for a lunch break and the group relaxed, ready to enjoy the moment together. Fishing side by side, the protagonist drank in the tranquil scenery and let a deep calm wash over him. Pata tossed his fish into the group's hands, grinning as he revealed he'd even brought his mother's lunchbox. Zink gaped, stunned that Loki couldn't fish. He never saw that coming. With everything ready, the group gathered to feast and soak in the moment, readied the fish for roasting, and Mesa whipped out a gleaming magical tool that lit the fire and stunned the protagonist. Then Zink explained it drew power from a magic stone, and when they turned it on, everyone gasped at how effortless and convenient it was. Bursting with excitement, the protagonist shouted, "I can finally eat grilled fish!" hoisting the item like a trophy, and marveling at how useful it was. They lounged in the campfire glow, tearing into roasted fish while he leaned back, drank in the peaceful landscape, and declared he'd never felt more at peace. He kept tending the grill and warned another fish was almost done. Then everyone gasped when the next thing on the spit was insects. But Loki grinned, swore they were amazing with salt, and soon the whole group was chomping together, reveling in the wild picnic. After savoring lunch, everyone declared the meal mouth-watering and chose to fish longer for exercise. Mesa lit a fire by proposing a team battle to crank up the fun. When the group couldn't agree how to split into teams, the protagonist grinned, tossed out a game from his world, rock, paper, scissors, and everyone leaned in, buzzing with curiosity and excitement. The teams took their places and the air crackled with rivalry as Mesa declared, "I won't lose," and Loki vowed he wouldn't go easy. He teamed up with Pata, syncing their moves and calling for help to shift the heavy stones. Words failed him, so he hammered out the plan with gestures. When Pata read him, relief hit like a wave, and his confidence locked in for the challenge. The protagonist barked excited commands, firing orders for Pata to shift stones while they lunged for insects, and Pata leapt into action, obeying with explosive energy. A punch of guilt hit him. He'd pushed too hard. Spotting Pata hunched and gasping, he mouthed an apology and urged they slow down. Pata shrugged it off, insisting he was fine. Shoulder to shoulder, they dove back into the search, cautious and perfectly in sync. He grabbed Pata's shoulder and urged him not to push himself, worry cutting through his voice at how hard Pata was trying. Pata froze for a beat, stunned, then relief cracked a trembling smile across his face as he realized he'd clearly understood what was said. Tears in his eyes, he joyfully repeated that he understood, and that small gesture meant a lot to him. Understanding him at last, Pata flung himself into the protagonist's arms, hugged him tight, and shouted with joy that he could now also talk with him. The group exploded into cheers, stunned by the sudden breakthrough, while he froze, mind racing, had simple chats with Pata unlocked his language comprehension, and without him even knowing, turned him into an isekai language teacher? The protagonist rounded the gang up for a celebratory feast at a shop he alone knew. Everyone cheered Pata's progress, and crackling with excitement, they charged off together toward the place. They tore into a blissful, easygoing feast, lifting cups and beaming smiles to toast their achievement in good company. A few days later, he shot awake, feeling lighter than he'd been in months. Refreshed. The medicine had worked, and he vowed to ask Mace's mother the price next time. He scanned his status and watched his skills surge. Charge and presence detection both flashed level 3, and a satisfied smile told him he'd already reached his initial goal of 1.5. He was weighing stashing his coin in the guild when a furious woman burst in, startling him as she screamed why he hadn't been visiting her. She insisted she didn't miss him, but she seethed over his absence. Stunned, he asked if something had happened, baffled by the scolding. He'd just been chewed out for ditching when a blast of good news hit. His promotion to F rank was confirmed, so he seized the moment, asked to withdraw his savings, and declared with steely resolve. He snapped his gear into place, slung on his pack, and surged toward the next challenge, the Rocka Plains. Cheers exploded, flooding Loki with congratulations as he hit rank F and claimed his brand-new adventurer license. As the crowd celebrated, he stared at the card with curious eyes and asked if its material could be changed. An animated woman, thrilled by his achievement, beamed that the license suited him, and a third person replied casually that they could make that change. The woman declared licenses run on a material ladder: copper, iron, silver, even adamantite, each tier a rank. You can swap a license's material if you pay extra. The protagonist, baffled, demanded why exchanges seemed arbitrary, and she shrugged that it's common, just the processing fee. Rage exploded when he realized the whole system was just a microtransaction. Loki slammed the guild for pricing everything for the rich. Only high ranks even care about card quality. And the woman snapped that the guild is a business. It can't hand out precious minerals for free. Doubt gnawed at Loki. Could Srank tied to adamantite really be the highest? He spun to Amanda and demanded straight up, was Srank the absolute limit? Loki sneered that using adamantite for the highest rank smelled of laziness and no ambition. Amanda blinked, stunned, and admitted he was right. A higher rank once existed, but they wiped it away the moment they realized no hunter alive today could ever summon the strength to reach it. Amanda shrugged, saying she hadn't mentioned the lost ranks because she thought it unnecessary, and Loki's eyes sparked. If our hunters can't claw back to that old rank, maybe someone outside the guild can. A bold idea slammed into him in silence. If reborn heroes from another world really existed, legends like Takuya, then maybe one of them could seize the lost rank. Loki couldn't stop replaying visions of the legendary hero Takumi, picturing him reborn as a prince and never forced into a hunter's life. Loki burned with a fierce need to find him if he still lived. And Amanda, reading the iron in his gaze, stepped forward to reveal something vital the moment he mentioned it. Loki's interest hit like a spark. Excitement exploded in Amanda, and every head snapped toward her. She launched into the legend of the lost rank, rhapsodizing over his cleverness. Loki recoiled at the theatrical praise and tried to slink away, insisting he was still low rank and everything was fine for now. But Amanda refused to back down and pressed on, determined to spill every last detail. The next day, Loki crackled with excitement as he readied for the Rocka Plains, buying supplies and antidotes, chasing down every scrap of information while Amanda's pressure hung over him like a storm cloud. Eyes blazing with excitement, he swore he'd buy his weapon and armor at dawn, strode out with iron resolve, and shouted that he was ready to explore the plains. Loki stormed into the blacksmith's to order his armor. The smith, with the leather and stock, declared it would take 4 days. Then, after a beat, he backtracked. Make that 5. Panic surged through Loki, and he exploded into an exaggerated meltdown, while someone nearby demanded, "Have you lost your mind for good?" Loki snapped at the blacksmith, insisting he'd prepared everything, had risen at dawn for the plains, and urged them to use the ready-made armor. The blacksmith, serious, shot the idea down, warning it was a matter of life and death. Ill-fitting armor would cripple him in combat. He insisted on measuring Loki first because there was no ready-made armor in a child's size, and Loki slumped, groaning in frustration. Loki ditched his armor for the recon, prowled the weapon displays, froze when a sword caught his eye, and, eyes bright with excitement, asked to see it up close. The blacksmith's eyes widened. Then he relented and agreed. Loki hefted the sword and a fierce excitement surged through him. The blade was the perfect size and sat squarely within his budget. Loki staggered when the sword pulsed with a power-boosting enchantment, yet carried a dirt-cheap tag. The blacksmith shrugged. No one in town wanted it. Enchantments clung to staffs, and the local hunters, rank E through and through, never used such weapons. Yet he forged the sword anyway. Loki pressed him on why he'd craft something so specific, and the blacksmith met him with a hard, silent stare that screamed purpose. Eyes fixed on the enchanted blade, Loki felt the truth snap into place. The blacksmith had forged it, expecting no one in town would buy it. He stood, brow knotted, hunting for an explanation, when the blacksmith's face hardened and he admitted, "I forged that sword for my son." Loki's grin snapped shut when he learned the blacksmith had a son. He blurted it out, and the air went thick with awkward silence. He hit a raw nerve and hurriedly apologized. The blacksmith met him with a sad, steady stare and said not to worry. His son was exactly as Loki imagined, a youth ravenous for adventure. Then he shifted and asked if Loki planned to buy the sword. Loki snapped up the enchanted sword, excitement pounding in his chest, while the blacksmith, a faint smile on his lips, said he'd put the blade in the showcase to sell it because he was sure his son would have wanted it that way. The mood snapped. The blacksmith's face hardened into a dark, serious mask as he glared at Loki and demanded, "You're really going to the rocket planes without armor?" When the question pinned him, Loki swallowed any lie and confessed he intended to go to the Rock of Plains unarmored. He knew it looked reckless, but confidence roared in him. His stats had already slammed into the level cap, and he swore he could take on the region's monsters and walk away alive if he stayed razor calm. The blacksmith begs him not to sell the sword until his armor's finished, desperate to stop a hasty departure. Loki stares inward. He remembers hardening himself by meeting threats alone, spurning common shortcuts and the guild's help. While others wait for backup or the recommended level, he charges straight into danger, knowing someone else would hang back. But not him. Loki's jaw clenched as he snapped he won't wait 4 days for the armor. Armed with only a knife, he'll still plunge into the new hunting grounds, meeting the blacksmith with steady eyes to make his decision clear. He must move forward. Risk be damned. Panic slams into the blacksmith when he sees Loki blazing with the same reckless spirit as his son. Grief strangling his voice, he choked out that while he poured every ounce of sweat and soul into forging that sword, his son died. A memory rips through him. After a suffocating silence, he snaps at Loki to wait there, then storms out, leaving the air crackling with tension. The blacksmith storms back with armor, buckles it onto Loki and declares it fits perfectly. When Loki asks if it belonged to his son, the blacksmith, flat and biting, scoffs that the plate will shrug off even an air-praying mantis's magic. Plenty to stop any stupid, reckless deaths. Tension snaps around Loki. He flashes an ironic smile and says it sharpens his focus, and the blacksmith stares him down, vowing that if Loki dies in that armor, he'll hunt him down and kill him again. In the training field behind the shop, the blacksmith narrows his eyes at Loki, armored and sword in hand, as the boy steels himself to practice, then orders him to put his strikes to the test. While training, Loki hefts the blade, feels its weight like a summons, and in a quiet beat dares to ask if the blacksmith had secretly been waiting for someone worthy to wield that forgotten sword. Loki danced with the sword in crisp, lightning-quick arcs, every controlled strike proving he'd become one with the blade. The blacksmith stands silent, throat tight. This boy hits him like his own son. When asked about the sword, Loki beams, praising it as feather-light, effortless to wield and perfect in the hand. Then he locks eyes, thanks them with fierce sincerity, and vows he will not die. Loki finally seized a strange weapon and armor brimming with raw, living emotions. Armed with them, he slammed the tutorial area behind him and charged into the wider world, determination blazing as his mind raced through the next moves of his journey. Loki thrusts a pouch of coins forward, insisting he'll pay for the weapon and armor, and the blacksmith squares his shoulders and flat out refuses. The seller snaps that the items were never for sale. Loki roars he has the money but can't sway him. and their explosive argument rings out, dragging the whole neighborhood into the chaos. Loki, having only scraped together enough for the sword and smarting from not affording the armor, trudged to the church, his final stop. And though he'd exchanged a few words with the steward before, this was his first time stepping inside, and the leftover coins that should have felt like a game's reward couldn't banish the knot of confusion tightening in his gut. Loki slips into the church, drinking in the goddess statues and the hush of the place. He spots a worshiper bowed in prayer and asks if that's the proper way to pray, and the temple's caretaker greets him with a warm smile, noting his refined bearing and assuring him that, yes, it is a true prayer. Loki storms into the status chamber and freezes as a glowing stone broadcasts his rank to everyone. The public gaze claws at him. Curiosity flares and he fires off. Does the offering's value change the information it reveals? The non jolts, visibly startled by the question. A voice snaps, "That's asking for punishment!" And Loki scrambles out a quick apology, mortified by the reaction. Loki uncovers that lavish donations to the church buy VIP invitations to the Fennel Empire's elite events. But out here in the countryside, it doesn't touch them. He stares at the gilded halls, feeling how money puppeteers the faith, while across the way, someone bursts in, eyes blazing at a huge offer and ready to hurl themselves into the ritual. Loki drops the act and spills the real reason he came to the church, the class selection. He discovers the ritual is treated as a divine blessing, and that reciting the prayers right can shape which class you're given. Stunned, he vows to accept whatever fate hands him and turn it into fuel for his journey. The nun intones that choosing a class summons a divine blessing that rockets a student's experience, multiplies gains, and hones class-specific skills, and Loki's eyes blaze as he realizes each class packs unique abilities and even sits in a strict ranking. Blindsided by another RPG-like system, he clamps his focus and forces himself to accept this is reality now. He realizes his biggest problem is a crippling lack of power, and Loki hears the nun whisper about a possible special class, something almost unheard of. Only a divine revelation can unveil it. She admitted she'd only ever seen beginner and intermediate rank classes in the city, but with an ancient priest who still channels revelations, a sliver of possibility opens for something far greater. Curiosity crackling, Loki leans in and presses for more as the nun darts off to summon the priest. They dragged Loki before the city's revered priest, an elder who still hears the gods, and Loki's breath caught as the full weight of the moment slammed into him. Unfazed, Trail proves he can still pull off the class selection, wielding his rare ability to reveal a special class. Confused by the process, Loki blurts out whether he can still receive divine protection. As he watches and listens, realization hits. This special class wields unique skills, and the gift of divine revelation is limited in use. Priest Trail clasps his hand, eyes warm, and declares, "Everyone's origins are different. What matters is that you keep learning." Loki's gaze tore across 6 colossal statues: commerce, sin, life, love, war, and fertility, each stone goddess daring him not to stare. Loki's chest tightened as he realized they all loved humans equally, and a playful acorn-headed figure danced for his attention. But he snubbed her. She wasn't one of the revered goddesses. Loki shot out the question, "Only 6 goddesses?" And the priest confirmed, pronouncing that every prayer during class selection must be offered to those 6. He can pick one to worship, but they tell him to pray to every deity. Praying to all might spit out an unexpected class. To force the revelation, he must lock his focus on the class he wants, and with that iron focus, the ritual can begin. Loki drops to his knees before the goddess's statues, voice raw with sincerity, as he pleads to be granted the class he desperately craves. Give me one that explodes in growth, bristles with raw strength, soaks up hits with ironclad defense, and tears through foes in melee. Gripped by that fierce desire, something unexpected snapped into being and snatched his attention. During the prayer, Loki keeps his eyes shut, as a strange presence coils around him. Like the goddesses whispering among themselves, the words call and prepare echoing in his skull. A calm voice issues the command, and moments later he might crack his eyes open. Something hidden is about to be revealed. Loki's eyes snap open to a ring of divine figures looming over him, and it slams into him. The voice he heard was young, not human. She could be one of the goddesses. The air crackles, shouting that something extraordinary is happening. A divine figure's eyes snap to Loki, surprise ringing in her voice as she demands, "Who are you?" Even the goddesses flinch. His presence is disturbingly out of place. Dizzy in the unfamiliar hall and squinting to decide if he truly stood before the goddesses, Loki is ripped out of his daze by a sharp, commanding voice. One of them, impatience burning, snarls, "Tell me who you are," and slams him to the ground before he can even react. A lone figure strides forward, voice like a knife. She declares Loki an anomaly in this world, mercilessly snaps that she doesn't care who he is and leaves no doubt he's not welcome. The shadowed woman fixes Loki with an icy stare, thrusts out a hand and vows to erase him from existence. Loki collapses, sweat stinging his brow as he watches his life teeter on the edge of a power he can't begin to fathom. Just as erasure slammed into Loki, a goddess smashed through the strike and stopped it cold, shouting that he's an anomaly and demanding they hear his story. The air crackles with tension, but now he finally has a chance to speak. Nearly wiped from existence, Loki now faces an icy calm as interrogators demand who he is and why he's in that world. Trembling, he admits he goes by Loki but was born Mamiya Yuto, and that he was yanked into a mysterious space with no clue what was happening, effectively kidnapped and stranded there by accident. Loki insists a godlike figure hauled him into this world, but his tongue locks on her name, and the goddesses whisper that at odd moments his mind goes unread and his powers vanish from their sight, convincing them he tumbled through a dimensional rift rather than lying. His mystery hooks them. Whispers say he either lost his memory or is wielding some unknown force, and that rings alarm bells because he could be deadly. The goddesses explode into a fierce clash, debating whether Loki should be left alive. He's an unknown, dangerous force they can't trust. Loki sputters and pleads, frantically insisting he knows nothing. A cruel command cuts him off. "Be silent, anomaly!" Desperation claws at him as the air tightens, and every second grows heavier. Sick of being branded a threat, Loki snaps, springing to his feet and roaring that the gods are selfish, inept, and capricious. After everything he's endured, he refuses to be judged without a chance to speak. Loki storms up to the goddesses, fury crackling in his voice as he snarls, "I tried to speak with respect and you just ignored me." Rage explodes. One screams for his death, branding his deed unforgivable, while another coldly agrees to kill him even knowing it will devastate the city's residents. Loki erupts in fury, slamming the goddesses as criminals for trampling the innocent, as the memory of being ripped from his world crashes over him. Shoved into a savage forest with no explanation and forced to survive like a player in a twisted game, he erupts in revolt, bewildered why he was brought and refusing to be painted as the villain. Loki erupts, ripping into how he was hurled into a savage, unknown world with no food, no water, no survival skills. Forced to fight, gnaw raw fish, and fend for himself. When he finally staggered into Bezart town and met people for the first time, hope flared, and all he wanted was to live well in that new world. Tears carving channels down his face, Loki pleads for answers, voice cracking. Why is he treated this way and punished for merely trying to survive? He clutches the memory of that world's warm embrace, acceptance his own parents never gave him. He only wanted to live in peace. Certain his end has come, Loki surrenders to a deep sorrow, yearning to be reborn into a world where effort matters, clinging to the promise he made never to die, but, with every escape sealed, he resigns himself. Until an unexpected voice cuts through the silence. A goddess pins Loki with a piercing stare and snaps, "Who are you, really?" Sob choking his words, he confesses with raw honesty. He's no god, just a man who clawed his way back to life and is finally tasting joy in this world. He has no answers, he only wants to live. A goddess leans in and tells Loki straight. They sometimes reincarnate souls from other worlds and gift them special skills, so did he get any before arriving? Loki's eyes widen. Surprise flashes as he scrambles through his memories, unsure. Loki throws back his head and grins, revealing he gained 2 skills. Youth Restoration, which ripped years off his appearance so he looks young despite being 32 years old, and Status Screen, which lets him pull up his attributes in MP. He calls out two hidden fields on his screen, clueless about what lurks inside them. The goddesses nod, proving he's telling the truth. They lean in, eyes blazing, hungry to unravel the skill's secrets. Loki declares his status screen is straight out of his world's games. Attributes glowing, skills cataloged, and a branching skill tree unfurling, with slots for blessings and titles glaring empty for now. The goddesses stare, stunned. This defies even their divine sight. Loki grins and exposes a skill system beyond the ordinary. He reads exact skill points, knows exactly how many he needs to learn new powers, and can reassign points at will, and one of them snaps, certain without a shred of doubt that a high-level god must be behind it. Loki admits his skill can't topple the world and dares the goddesses to finally understand. They reel, realizing he isn't a threat and that they jumped the gun. Seething, Loki explodes again, roaring that they tried to kill him before they'd even heard his story. Guilt consumed the goddess. Neil, voice raw with sincerity, begged Loki's forgiveness for trying to kill him without ever listening. Taken aback, he accepts their apology. It's fine, he says, so long as they understand his situation. Then he apologizes for his harsh words and pushes the talk back to why he came to the church. Shock rockets through Loki as he realizes he can't choose a class. The goddesses' voices ring out. As lesser deities, they can bestow blessings only on those born into this world. He's not one of them. He pleads to return to his original world. They confess they lack that power too. Alicia leans in, insisting it's now their duty to guide him to salvation, and at last Loki's gaze snaps up and locks on her face. The moment Loki realizes how breathtaking she is, he goes stunned, his cheeks flushing hot as her beauty hijacks every thought. Loki's breath catches. He's been granted the priest-only skill, divine revelation, letting him hear messages from the goddesses once a day. Startled, Loki demands whether someone's been watching him every moment. They admit it, but promise they can only see his status, and Alicia rushes in, soothing that he can come to them for help whenever he needs. Yet Loki, still suspicious, snarls he'd rather never set foot in the church again. Loki exploded in fury when he learned the divine revelation skill only lets goddesses speak to him while he can't answer. Alicia stepped forward, vowing to fix it by granting him the ultra-rare celestial channeling, an ability only priestesses can obtain, and said she'd do it as her apology, draining nearly all her power to bestow it, and then slipping into rest, leaving everyone stunned by the sudden decision. Loki bolts upright, heart hammering, confirms it really happened, rips open his skill list and reels when he finds the rare skill celestial channeling, a power that lets him speak straight to the goddesses. Denied classes and blessings, he steels himself with a grin and declares this the true start of his isekai life. The new skill works only once a day, so he plans to test it before sleep, while worry claws at him over Alicia Sama's condition. Loki activated the channeling and was instantly drenched in a storm of goddess voices, all clamoring at once, arguing over who should speak, flinging rules, threats of divine punishment, and jealous barbs about his talks with others. Some sang his praises, others harangued him about duties, and Loki, fighting to stay calm and asking desperately if Alicia was okay, was so overwhelmed he could only whisper a timid hello. Loki unlocks celestial channeling, a once-a-day skill he can unleash that drains 50 mempa. It's practically useless. Irritated at getting no useful info and wasting energy, he erupts in fury, bellows, "It's a trash skill," and hurls the notebook away. Then he forces himself to think positive. But displeasure sours into a snarl, as he wonders if useless goddesses always come bundled with setups like this. Loki stares into the void, tracing how the lower-rank goddesses tug the world's strings, while the higher god Fursa looms above, pulling the fate of all. 8. Even under their crushing absolute sway, he plants his feet and vows to live on his own terms, stares up at the sky, wondering if even this choice is already in the acorn head's hands. Then, fierce and certain, he tells himself, no. Our protagonist pleaded like a dying ember, was brushed aside, threatened, and finally silenced. Then he snatched a rare skill that let him speak with the goddesses, and the moment he used it, he realized it was pointless, a brutal minute of relentless one-sided babble. He staggers, muscles on fire, yet bulldozes through his routine without rest, shrugs off every warning, and charges back to hunt in the rock of plains, insisting everything's fine. Alone, he'll smash through the crushing fatigue, Frustration ate at him as Trail's kindness shoved a hot spike of guilt into his chest. He couldn't pick a new job and even clashed over offerings. And when he finally reached the Rock of Plains, he felt time had been wasted by the goddesses and branded the whole thing a disaster. He wanders lost in thought when something unexpected snaps him out of his reverie. He keeps shouldering his load now through a bustling fair, eyes scanning every corner, his mind still wrapped in thought as merchants and residents weave between the stalls. The protagonist reached the city's north gate and stood awestruck as a living tide of movement surged around him. Compared to South Gate, that side teems with stalls and crowds, the air crackling as the whole place morphs into a living fantasy. Spotting a group heading for the Rock of Plains, he melts into the shadows and tails them silently to reach his destination. At the Rocket Plains, he launches into his hunt, pulse hammering. He sees no one hunts alone and doesn't flinch, watching the open field and rival squads as he sizes up the pros and cons. Monsters are easy to spot, but so is anyone who could swipe his basket. Still, he presses forward, eyes cutting the scenery and hands ready to strike. Loki confronts his first challenge, a razor-winged air mantis. The enemy melts into the underbrush, but he keeps his cool and decides to test his skills. When he spots the hidden creature, he steels himself, resolve coiling like a spring as he prepares to strike. The instant Loki locks eyes with the air mantis, he ignites his skill and zeroes in on the enemy's presence. He rockets in with surgical precision. One lightning-fast, unerring strike slams into the target and ends the fight. Loki lunged at the poisonous rat, striking with brutal speed to end it before its scent could summon a swarm of kin. He lunges, and it all collapses. His strike drags, and even when he realizes the mistake, his body won't stop. The fight spirals out of control and blindsides him. After he vanquished the poisonous rat, Loki's body grew resistant to poison. And to everyone's shock, that resistance instantly shot up to level 2. Curiosity ignited. He saw that even with the barest scraps of intel, these monsters spit out massive rewards. A hungry grin splits his face. Poison mice are perfect prey, and he's about to exploit that advantage to the fullest. Loki storms back from the hunt with 21 poisonous rats in tow, one mangled beyond use by brutal damage, the rest earning top marks. He replayed his effortless fights and wondered if endless training in Palmyra had gone too far. The air mantis was laughably simple, so he started plotting a move into Uluwiv Forest sooner than planned. Loki feels the old trap snap shut. A streak of victories had him believing he was untouchable, and he remembers how that arrogance can blow everything to ruin. Seeing the forest question for the test it was, he slams the brakes and plants his feet firmly on the ground. He swears he won't charge into the next area until he's absolutely battle-ready on the Rock of Plains. Loki's warned that even as a lone powerhouse in the Uluwiv Forest, profit is slim. The spoils are bulky. Prized orc meat drags him down, and he sees that no matter how many monsters he fells, he can only carry so much. The attendant implores him to halt and scrutinize the information before he advances, and the protagonist nods, resignation etched across his face. Loki stalks a group he'd spotted earlier as they collect the payment for their mission. Each will soon snatch 41,400 biki, enough to rest for a few days. Odd, he sees most hustle for about 10,000 biki a day, while he'd live well on half, and just by watching, he picks up loads about how experienced adventurers live. Loki's curiosity ignites at the group's promise, but he snaps the idea shut. Intriguing, yet utterly unviable for him. Even if he hired a carrier to haul his gear, he needed a partner who could match his breakneck tempo on the hunt. He sees the true obstacle as clashing goals. While others chase comfort and stability, he burns to push his power to its absolute limit. And as that hits him, someone suddenly calls his name. When someone asks, "When will you form a group?" Loki jolts, scrambles to hide, and mumbles he was just thinking about it. Around him, people murmur he's the promising newcomer turning heads, even Amanda's favorite. A battle-hardened adventurer watches the scene, eyes like steel, dissecting the boy's every move and turning questions over in his head. 4 days later, Loki spots a game-changing pattern. Experience from monsters scales with their skill tier. After a single poisonous rat, he jumped poison resistance to level 2, and it's already at 3. Seeing Palmyra monsters only carry level 1 skills, he deduces the poison mice must be rocking level 4 poison resistance. explaining the insane XP spike and proving the environment and its monsters drive how skills evolve. Loki vows to crank his poison resistance up to at least level 6, ideally 7, by hunting high-skill monsters before he ever sets foot in Uluwive. It hits him. Staking out a single spot to hunt is useless here. He has to guard the basket every second. Then he stumbles on a sickening discovery. The poisonous rats are cannibals, turning the whole situation into a living nightmare. Loki, chasing pure efficiency, vows to hunt everything in one place. Then it hits him. A round trip back to the bazaar to stash his haul would chew up 2 hours, making the plan impossible. He conjures a sky-high platform and plans to hoist his basket beyond the monster's reach. He imagines piling earth with his shovel, dismisses the thought as ridiculous. Then a memory slams him. The Huli mole taught him earth magic. Loki, itching for mischief, dares to test earth magic and grins as he shouts, "Ground rise!" to toy with it like a prank. Stunned, it actually takes hold. He repeats the command with iron resolve and the ground surges up. His mana drains away, proof the spell fired, and he remembers he couldn't use fire before, now wondering why earth magic answered. Loki gapes as the magic bursts to life. A startling thought hits. Maybe the secret lies in the feet, not the hands. And burning to prove it, he casts the spell again. He rips the ground higher, triumphant, but spots monsters can still clamber up the mound. His excitement spikes at how much more earth he summoned. Loki hammers earth magic into crude pillars, but every column stalls short of his goal, and the more complex a command becomes, the more it devours his mana. He overacts, and the magic refuses to spark. A lightning realization hits. The spell bends to your tone and words, not flashy moves. So he turns actor, pouring intent into every syllable, and a flicker of understanding finally awakens. Loki's grin sharpens as he realizes he can fuse keywords within the bounds of his current earth magic and sculpt spells with pinpoint precision. He yells, "Create a long pillar!" and a colossal earth spire rips from the ground, proving the true key is the exact choice and combination of words. Loki whooped as earth magic ripped a towering, solid pillar from the earth. Now he can hunt in one spot without fretting over the basket's safety. Then his grin dropped when he stared at the top. He never thought about how to retrieve the basket he'd placed up there. Loki whooped, hoisting a basket bulging with fallen monsters and basking in the raw thrill of a flawless hunt. He laughs at how his idea of magic flipped. Once he squandered spells trying to grill fish with his hands. Now he knows the power bursts from the feet, not the hands. And though lowering the basket from the pillar was a brutal struggle, he's thrilled with the result and how far he's come. Loki's fire magic finally ignites and he howls with shocked joy, a cry that makes a nearby adventurer flinch and scramble back in fear. Someone blurts about a newcomer who always goes alone, eyes snapping to him. The talk turns into a blunt question. Is his lone streak why he's still alone? Loki, mortified, scrambles to hide his shock. Aident saunters in with swagger, introduces himself like a challenge, and snaps that Loki should count himself lucky to be offered a spot in his crew. Loki's face went utterly uninterested as they shot back a polite, blunt, no thanks. And Aiden froze, eyes wide, completely caught off guard. Adam snaps when his offer is refused, roaring that hunting only works in a pack and newcomers must stick to the veterans. They hurl insults and threats, but Loki stands stone cold and resolute. He insists he'll go it alone and is ready for what comes. He smashes aside every provocation with icy indifference as a seething Aiden snarls that he'll report him to the guild. A guild employee leans toward Loki and lays it out. Aiden only tried to recruit him for his rewards. They wanted to lock down the newcomer before any rival group could snatch him. She declares she can't favor anyone as staff, but vows to issue a formal warning to Aiden's group. Loki exhales. That already helps a lot. And she lauds his iron resolve, visibly pleased he rejected them. Loki's mind kept snagging on the Bezart mess. It wasn't about power, but about locals whose grudges could derail his life. The guild had drilled him to own those situations, but being tailed or threatened would still spell disaster. He'd come to Bezart thinking it was full of good people, but the mask fell off. He's tangled in an uncomfortable situation. 4 days of hunting bumped him to level 9, and he's determined to grind to at least level 11 before returning to Palmyra. mainly to avoid crossing paths with Aden's group again. At night, Loki prays the trouble with Aden's group won't spiral out of control. The next day, Loki jolts when his first emergency mission lands: exterminate poisonous rats. The reward has surged because an outbreak might be brewing. Loki wonders if his recent actions sparked it. Loki watched the group bolt out, weapons in hand and every movement electric with readiness for the emergency mission. Wasting no time, he storms the field with a basket strapped to his back, tearing through monsters with pinpoint strikes as his determined hunt drives him onward. Loki keeps hunting like nothing's wrong, then spots Aden's group dogging his heels. Winded but relentless, they barrel after him across the field. Pushed to the edge by their insistence, Loki snaps, bellowing his complaint as frustration boils over. Sick of the chase, Loki spins on Aden's group and demands, "How long are you going to keep tailing me?" They put on a casual act, claiming they're just moving to another area. Loki's gaze slices through the feeble excuse. He orders them to find another spot, calling hunting together inefficient. After a knife-edge standoff, Aden grits his teeth and gives in, while Loki's eyes narrow, suspicion flaring. Are they after what's tucked in his basket? Loki's eyes flashed as he confirmed his earth magic had surged to level 3, granting him the power to command 4 keywords. Testing himself, Loki unleashes a brand new spell, shouting, "Create, deep, long pillar," and a colossal pillar erupts skyward, leaving Aden's group stunned as his magic surges into terrifying new mastery. Loki erupts in ecstatic triumph. He pulled off the new earth spell perfectly on his first try. Aden's group gapes, questioning who he really is. Meanwhile, Loki leans over the pillar, confirms the deep command took hold, and watches the structure plunge downward exactly as expected. Loki steels himself to leave, loudly declares, "I'm going hunting," while his mind scrambles to force a mask of confidence. Burning with resolve, he vows to expose the true gap between his skills and Aden's group. When a mocking good luck is tossed at him, he strides on, dead set on proving his worth alone. Needing to retrieve his basket perched atop the pillar, Loki measures the height in a heartbeat, visualizes a 5-meter shaft, channels his magic with razor precision, commands, "Create 5 meters in length," pillar, and a new column rockets up to the exact height he needs. Loki scales the pillar, his stomach twisting at the dizzy height, snatches the basket from the summit, marks 26 MP per platform in his mind, and knows he must razor-edge his magical reserves. Elated by the experiment's result, he knows he'll hunt across the plains with ruthless efficiency. Grinning, he brandishes his sword and races back into the field. Time to hunt more. Loki staggers back, lungs burning and limbs like lead after a relentless day of hunting. Loki staggers under a basket so overflowing he can barely carry it. When he slams the materials down, the evaluator's eyes pop. The haul is enormous, sparking a guild uproar and an emergency mission, yet no other hunter notices anything odd, proving the fuss was because Loki hunted far too much. When blamed for the emergency mission, Loki snaps it's not his fault the poisonous rats ran wild. Then, with a crooked grin, he lets slip that his relentless hunting kicked the whole commotion into gear. He stayed laser-focused on hunting more, demanded a bigger basket, and insisted his pay be sent as usual, while the evaluators gaped at the staggering amount and quality he'd hauled in. Loki wheezes that hauling a full basket drained him, admitting he kept a brutal sprint through the hunt. The evaluators gape that he ran with that weight and realize his iron endurance is why he brings back such a massive haul. The scene slams shut as the local staff erupt in shouts, summoning everyone back to their posts. Loki jokes that only a custom-made basket could hold the mountain he's lugging, strides off to report the day's events to Amanda. And right then, Aden materializes, pouncing on the chance and snarling for Loki to hand something over. Loki utterly snubs him. Aden, fury blazing, storms out of the room. Amanda and the guild corner Loki after Adenti and his crew lie that he joined their ranks, twisting his words into a forged agreement. They even demanded to split the rewards. Loki spits out indignant denials, but the rival group's blatant manipulation quickly tangles the whole situation. Loki's eyes snap as the rival crew bulldozes the scene, trying to exploit the moment even though they lack his skill. While everyone else recoils at the gap in power, they push forward anyway. Snapping from the provocation, Loki demands their ranks and earnings. Amanda coldly reveals they're all rank F and only pulled in 42,000 Biki that day. Clear proof they rank far below him, and he decides he will no longer stay silent. Amanda pins them with a blunt, "Was Loki on your team?" Their lie about sharing profits shatters, and she makes them hand over the fair split she demanded. Loki slams the 5,000 Biki into their faces, snarling that only a fool would trade 400,000 Biki solo for a useless group. Then one of them snaps, "Shut up," and the tension explodes. Loki's final warning sliced the silence. If they keep following and disturbing him, he'll treat them as enemies, just like monsters. With ice in his voice and a razor's calm, he vows to slaughter without mercy anyone who defies him or aids those hunting him. Anyone who interferes with his hunt is goblin scum to him, and the group reels back, stunned. Loki's threat slams into the room like lightning. A dent explodes. "Don't you dare think you're above us!" While the receptionist, trembling, frantically calls for the guildmaster. The old guildmaster storms in, scowling at the late-night ruckus, and barks at Loki to follow him. He's disturbing everyone. A man vows to force others to respect him. Across the office, someone else falls silent and listens as realization slams into them. Anyone who ignores the signs will face the fallout. Rage boiled in the hunter. He slammed the verdict as a crooked insult. The old man met his glare and said he'd listened to both sides and refused to favor either. The boy watches, relief roaring through him the instant he sees he's there. The old man vows he'll steer clear of any situation that could cost someone their life. He hisses a warning. If those two become enemies, others could get hurt. The hunter scoffs, bristling with indignation and calling it pure exaggeration. The man declares the boy's strength is monstrously abnormal, enough to cow anyone, and the hunter goes cold as that realization hits him. He realizes people have eyed him with suspicion his whole life and plots to reveal a sliver of his true power. The group stands accused of goading the boy and fabricating the reports. He thunders that their actions cross the line, and under the guild's code they're cast out forever. No chance to ever be hunters again. The man admits the case nearly exploded into a courtroom battle. He insists that, despite the expulsion, they can still hunt for other work. Loki backs the decision, and everyone quickly waves it off as settled. He glared at the decision, laughably lenient, nowhere near enough, and the others flinched at his icy, unyielding reaction. He swallows the same punishment handed to the others, then snaps, demanding compensation meant just for him. They begged with raw, desperate voices. He stayed stone cold, snapping they should have thought about the risks before they stepped in. Cold as winter steel, he vows that anyone who tried to use him deserves punishment. He'll burn his name into their memories with endless suffering so they never forget him. He made it brutally clear. This isn't a game you can rewind and restart. The man barked a warning. Push too hard and it'll end badly. Loki didn't blink, grinning cold as he said he'd welcome that, would even kill, but he's holding himself back. He spits that, should they be criminals, the law would let him execute them. The three collapse at the boy's feet, sobs ripping from them as they beg him to forgive them. They laid down every last coin and every piece of gear. They slink away, shoulders crushed by shame, defeated and hollow, while the boy watches in cold, unblinking silence. The boy thanks him and slides a small reward into his hand. The man arches a brow and snaps, "Is this your new way of acting?" The boy admits he might have exaggerated, but he won't stand for people who hurt others without a second thought. The man nods, knowing a single life could never make things right. The boy insisted the potion be handed to Jink and the others, declaring he owed them a favor. Her eyes pop. She grins and dives in, praising Loki's boldness as she hauls the load. Striding ahead, the man dropped a bomb. Maybe it's time we reassess the boy's ranking. He warns it could happen again and urges him to watch his back. The boy nods, vows he won't stay idle but promises to keep his head down and blend in. He levels an otherworldly gaze at the boy, and the doubts he'd nursed since their first meeting snap into cold, undeniable truth. He froze. Surprise slammed into him as he realized she'd deliberately tested his language comprehension, and suspicion tightened like a fist. The man dropped the bomb. Loki was from another world. The boy froze, suspicion igniting as he eyed the man's true intentions. The man steps forward, palms open, voice steady as he pleads he only wants help identifying something, and even dangles a reward. The man dares Loki to accept the mission, pitching it as a high-stakes gamble to win his trust. Suspicion bristles in Loki, but he gives a slow, wary nod. Curiosity claws at him, pulling him toward the request. He nails down a noon rendezvous at the guild, shoots a sharp thanks for the help, and melts into the crowd. Loki stalked toward the guild, suspicion prickling at the man's odd presence, when a voice sliced the air, calling his name and claiming to be the goddess of war. Loki snapped into stunned, razor-sharp alert. The goddess locks eyes with Loki and declares the world will be waiting to hear him again whenever he's ready. Loki's memory hits him. He was going to ask her something, but irritation flares as the memory of that skill, the one that caused trouble before, crashes back, and he swears he'll be far more careful this time. Loki unleashes divine call, ripping open a channel straight to the goddess Suzeraine, and speaks with her. She proclaims she's the goddess of abundance, fizzing with excitement to finally speak to him and teasing that everyone gets a thrill from watching the mortal world, while Loki realizes his increased level lets him keep the conversation going longer. Goddess Ristea cuts in, seizes the conversation, and snaps at Loki to explain why he made contact. She stands icy and razor-sharp, her calculating poise leaving Loki impressed, and he knows he can speak freely. The skill lays his thoughts bare. Loki burst out that he'd only just learned to cast magic, even though those conditions had existed before, and he turned to the goddess asking what had suddenly flipped the switch. She snaps that there are several possibilities, but for him, it probably boils down to who he is. And Loki's heart clenches. He knows the trouble began after he stepped into the church. The goddess declares magic is fueled by spirits who trade power for mana, and in Loki's case, not a single spirit or goddess can detect his presence. Indignation ignites in him. It hit him. If he hadn't crossed paths with the goddesses, he might never have been able to wield magic. Loki bows his head, offering a quick apology for griping so much, then straightens with a relieved grin. He says he feels much better now. He fixed his gaze on the goddess and fired off one burning question: how to stash items inside a special space. She inclined her head and gave him the green light to press on. Loki fires off questions about spatial magic and learns a traveler from another world already spent a skill point on it. Stunned, he rues how short the call was as it instantly cuts out. He replayed every lesson. The goddess's words snapped into place, and a cold certainty told him something huge would hit the guild tomorrow. Loki's grin explodes. He feels his true journey roaring to life. A strange noise rips into his ears. Baffled, he feels his consciousness slipping away fast.